Hey everyone! Tonight we are stepping back into a world of scorched earth, creaking timber, and the smell of gunpowder drifting over the vast golden plains of the South African veldt. Imagine you are standing in the middle of a horizon so wide it feels like it might swallow you whole. The air is bonedry, tasting of dust and wild sage, and far off in the distance, a massive column of dust rises into the sky. It isn't a storm, it's the British Empire, a sea of khaki and red, marching with the weight of the world's most powerful industrial machine behind them. But you aren't standing with them. You are crouched behind the thick, weathered wheel of an ox-wagon, heart hammering against your ribs, realizing that this simple piece of farm equipment is the only thing standing between you and the most professional army on the planet. Honestly, looking at the sheer scale of the British artillery, you probably wouldn't survive this if you weren't already thinking 3 steps ahead of their generals. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're listening from tonight, so go ahead and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun is a heavy weight on your shoulders as you squint against the glare, watching that British column lumber toward you. To them, the landscape is a hostile, empty void to be conquered. But to you, every donga and kopje is an old friend. You are a Boer Commando, a farmer soldier who has spent his entire life learning the rhythms of this land. You aren't dressed in a crisp uniform. You're wearing your everyday moleskin trousers, a felt hat pinned up on one side, and a bandolier slung over your chest like a second skin. Beside you, the khaki weather jawbone wagon sits silent. It looks like something out of a museum, a primitive wooden vessel pulled by 16 straining oxen. But in your hands, it is about to become a mobile fortress. This is the dawn of a new kind of warfare, where the rigid formations of the Victorian era are about to collide with the terrifying ingenuity of men who have nowhere left to retreat. As you check the action of your rifle, you can't help but find it a bit ironic. The British think they are coming here to teach a lesson to a bunch of uncivilized peasants. They have the Gatling guns, the naval cannons, and the prestige of an empire that spans the globe. Yet, as you look at your comrades, men ranging from 16-year-old boys to grandfathers with white beards, there is a quiet confidence. You aren't planning to stand in a line and trade volleys like it's the Napoleonic Wars. You know that the British logistics are their greatest weakness. They are tethered to the railway lines like a dog on a short leash, while you and your wagon are as free as the wind. Historians still argue whether the British failure to adapt to this mobility was due to sheer arrogance or a fundamental misunderstanding of modern ballistics. But for you, the debate is much simpler. If you stay still, you die. You hear the low, rhythmic thud of the British drums getting closer. It's a sound that should be intimidating, but it feels out of place here, amidst the whistling wind and the occasional cry of a plover. You've heard the rumors that some of the British officers brought dozens of crates of private wine and even grand pianos with them on the march. You, on the other hand, have a bag of biltong, a tin of coffee, and the knowledge that your wagon can go places their heavy wagons would get bogged down in seconds. It's a quirky bit of history that the Boers often used ostrich fat to keep their rifle bolts moving smoothly in the gritty dust, while the British struggled with official oils that turned into a sticky paste in the heat. It's those little things, the veldcraft as you call it, that make the difference between a soldier and a survivor. The first scouts of the British cavalry appear on the ridge, their horses looking lathered and exhausted. They've been chasing ghosts for 3 days. They don't see you yet. You are tucked into a fold of the earth, your wagon positioned at an angle that provides maximum cover while allowing a clear line of sight down the valley. This is the laager in its most basic, lethal form. Traditionally, the laager was a massive circle of wagons used to protect cattle and families from predators or raids, but you've refined it. You've turned it into a tactical asset that can be deployed in minutes and vanished by morning. It's the ultimate pop-up defense. You can almost see the confusion on the faces of the British officers when they eventually find your position of fortress made of wood and leather that was owned there yesterday, and won't be there when their reinforcements arrive. A fly lands on your hand, and you slowly brush it away, keeping your eyes fixed on the horizon. The sheer scale of what is happening begins to sink in. This isn't just a skirmish. It's a clash of 2 entirely different centuries. The British are the 19th century stiff, formal, and industrial. You are the 20th century decentralized, camouflaged, and highly mobile. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Second Boer War was one of the first total wars where the lines between civilian and combatant blurred into nothingness. Your farm is your base, your wagon is your tank, and your family is your logistics team. There's a certain grim humor in it. The British are trying to fight a war by the book, but you've already burned the book and used the pages to start a campfire for your coffee. You think back to the stories your father told you about the Great Trek, how the wagons were the only thing that kept the people together during the long journey into the interior. They weren't just vehicles, they were homes, temples, and shields. Now, you are asking them to be something more, a weapon of paralysis. If you can stop those British columns, if you can keep them pinned down in the heat while you pick off their officers and disappear into the scrub, you can win. It's a David and Goliath story, except David has a mouser and Goliath is wearing a very bright, very visible red coat. The first shot hasn't been fired yet, but the tension is thick enough to cut with a hunting knife. You take a deep breath, the dry air filling your lungs, and settle your shoulder against the wooden frame of the wagon. The wood is warm from the sun, smelling of old pine and axle grease. It feels solid, reliable. You aren't just defending a piece of dirt. You are defending a way of life that is tied to the movement of these wheels. The world is watching, though they don't know it yet. They see the photos, letter the grainy black and white images of bearded men and their strange wagons, and they wonder how you did it. How you took on an empire with nothing but grit and a few ox carts. But for now, the only thing that matters is the dust on the horizon and the steady beat of your own heart. As the British dust cloud edges closer, you find yourself tracing the grain of the wood on your wagon, marveling at the sheer structural genius of this machine. This isn't just a random cart, it's a kakabinwa, named for its profile that resembles the lower jawbone of an ox. It's a masterpiece of frontier engineering, designed specifically to survive a landscape that wants to break everything it touches. You look at the massive rear wheels, almost as tall as you are, and the front wheels, smaller, to allow for tight turns and rocky ravines. There's no iron in the frame where it counts. Everything is held together by wooden pegs and leather thongs. The vibrating terrain of the Karoo would snap the chassis like a dry twig within 10 miles. Instead, the wagon flexes. It groans and twists like a living thing, absorbing the shock of boulders and riverbeds that would shatter a British transport wagon into splinters. You remember your uncle explaining that the wood itself is a calculated choice. The yellow wood for the floor, the iron wood for the axles, and the stink wood for the spokes, each piece selected for its specific density and resilience. It's a mainstream historical fact that these wagons were the primary survival tool for the Boers for over half a century, acting as the bridge between civilization and the deep interior. But looking at it now through the lens of a soldier, you see more than a caravan. You see a modular tactical unit. The sides are high and thick enough to stop a long-range bullet, and the heavy canvas tent over the top provides a deceptive profile. To a British sniper a mile away, is there a man under that canvas? Or is it just a load of wool? They have to guess. You don't. There's a quirky bit of lore among the commandos that a well-maintained wagon can actually float. It sounds like a tall tale until you've seen a team of oxen drag one of these through a flooded river, the wooden body acting like a barge while the men swim alongside. It's that versatility that makes you feel a bit sorry for the British regulars. They are tied to their heavy, standardized general service wagons, which require graded roads and constant repair. You, meanwhile, are essentially driving an all-terrain vehicle designed in the 1830s. Historians still argue whether the Boer advantage lay more in their marksmanship or in this superior transport technology, but as you watch a British scout's horse stumble in a hidden badger hole, you're leaning toward the latter. The land is a weapon, and the wagon is your shield against it. You reach out and touch the diesel boom, the long wooden pole that connects the oxen to the wagon. It's smooth from years of use and the oils of human hands. In a few moments, if the order comes, you'll outspan those oxen and maneuver this 5,000-pound beast into a defensive line. You've practiced this since you were a boy, turning a moving line into a locked circle in under 10 minutes. You, Dan Teen, need a drill sergeant screaming in your ear to know where your wheel sits in the chain. You know the exact thickness of the planks, roughly 2 inches of seasoned hardwood, which is just enough to turn it. 303 British round into a harmless lead pancake at a distance. You've even stuffed some of the gaps with wool bales and bags of grain, creating a sandbag effect with whatever was on hand. The sarcasm of your predicament isn't lost on you. Here you are, a humble farmer, sitting in what is essentially a wooden box, waiting to take on the guys who invented the Industrial Revolution. It's like bringing a knife to a gunfight, except the knife is 18 feet long and weighs 2 tons. You've heard the British officers call these wagons clumsy and primitive. You can almost hear their laughter over their afternoon tea, but you know better. You know that while their steam-powered traction engines are getting stuck in the mud 10 miles back, your oxen are grazing on the scrub, fueling up for the next 40-mile trek. Your engine grows its own fuel and reproduces. There's needs a coal mine and a team of engineers. You take a moment to check your water barrel, which is slung beneath the wagon's belly to keep it in the shade. It's the little details of the kakabinwa that keep you alive. The trap or the chest at the front serves as your seat, your toolbox, and your ammunition crate. Everything has a place. There's a quiet efficiency to it that the British Army, with its miles of paperwork and red tape, could never replicate. You're not just a soldier, you're a self-contained logistical cell. If you get separated from the main commando, you have your food, your bed, and your fort right here. You could survive for a month on what's tucked into the nooks and crannies of this wooden frame. The wind shifts, bringing the scent of the British horses, a smell of oats and sweat that is distinct from the wilder scent of your own ponies. You feel the vibration in the ground. The heavy artillery is moving. Those 15-pounder guns are no joke. They can turn a wagon into toothpicks if they find the range. But that's the trick, isn't it? They have to find you first. And even if they do, you aren't a static target. By the time they unlimber those big guns and set their sights, you'll have hooked up the team and moved 300 yards behind a different ridge. It's a dance, a rhythmic swaying of the veldt that they simply don't have the music for. You look at the younger boys in your unit, their eyes wide as they watch the horizon. You give them a nod, a silent reassurance. You point to the wagon wheels and remind them to stay low, to use the iron rims as extra cover if things get warm. There's a strange comfort in the creak of the wood as the wagon settles into the dirt. It's the sound of home, even if home is currently a moving target. You've heard that some British soldiers actually began to fear the ghost wagons of the Boers, claiming they appeared in the middle of the night in places no vehicle should be able to reach. It's not magic, of course. It's just knowing how to use a lever and a bit of grease to get a wagon up a 60-degree slope. As the sun climbs higher, the heat shimmer begins to distort the British lines, making them look like a wavering mirage. They look vulnerable out there in the open, dressed in their uniforms, following their whistles and bugles. You, behind your wooden jawbone, feel almost invisible. This is the unlocking of the past that the history books talk about, using a tool from your grandfather's era to paralyze the future. You aren't just holding a line, you're holding a grudge, and you're doing it from the safest seat in the house. The ox-wagon isn't an antique, it's the ultimate guerrilla platform, and the British are about to find out just how hard it is to break. The British column is close enough now that you can see the individual glint of sun on their bayonets, but the order comes down the line to laager up. This is the moment where the farm wagon sheds its identity as a cargo hauler and becomes a fortress. You don't need a map or a set of blueprints. The muscle memory of your people takes over. You guide your team of 16 oxen with a sharp crack of the whip not hitting them, just signaling and pull your wagon into a precise position, overlapping the front left wheel with the rear right wheel of the wagon ahead of you. It's a mainstream historical fact that the laager was the foundational defensive tactic of the Boers, used for generations to survive the vast, unpredictable interior. But today, you aren't just circling up to keep the lions out. You're building a kill zone. You jump down from the seat and begin the heavy work of shoring up. You take thick thorn bushes, the wagon beachy, or wait-a-bit thorns, and lash them into the gaps between the wheels with rawhide strips. This creates an interlocking barrier that no cavalry charge can penetrate without shredding both horse and rider. It's a quirky bit of fringe history that some commandos would actually soak these thorn bushes in water if they had it, making them heavier and harder to set on fire if the British tried to smoke you out. You look down the line and see a wall of wood, iron, and thorns forming in a matter of minutes. Historians still argue whether the laager was a stroke of military genius or a desperate necessity. Of a people without permanent forts, But as you slide your rifle through a gap in the slats, it feels like the smartest thing anyone has ever built. You see a British officer through your binoculars, his horse prancing as he tries to make sense of the sudden obstruction in his path. He's likely been trained at Sandhurst to look for stone walls or earthen redoubts. He's looking for a fortress in the European sense, something static, heavy, and grand. What he sees instead is a collection of dusty laundry, crates of dried meat, and old wooden wheels. You can almost hear the sarcasm dripping from his thoughts. You imagine him turning to his sergeant and saying something about simple farmers and their carts. But that's the beauty of it. You've paralyzed his advance, not with a wall of granite, but with a wall of mobility. If he decides to bypass you, you'll just outspan and hit his flank by sunset. If he attacks, he has to run uphill against a hidden enemy. Inside the circle, the atmosphere is strangely calm. This is your mobile living room. Someone has already started a small fire using dried cattle dung mistwich burns with a low blue flame and very little telltale smoke. You see a man carefully sharpening his knife, while another is checking the tension on the wagon's brake handle. It's a strange juxtaposition. The most advanced military force on Earth is less than a mile away, yet you are worried about whether your coffee tin is rattling. You've heard that the British soldiers are often forbidden from desecrating their equipment for comfort, whereas you have modified your wagon with extra leather pockets for ammunition and a special rack for your mouser, so it doesn't get knocked out of true. The British start to deploy their infantry into skirmishing order. They move in beautiful, synchronized lines, like a slow-motion wave of khaki. It's impressive, in a tragic sort of way. You know that as soon as they get within 800 yards, the fortress will speak. You've positioned the wagons so that they follow the natural contour of a shallow ridge, giving you what the military types call defilade. You're protected from their direct fire, but you have a clear, plunging view of their approach. You've even buried the wagon wheels slightly into the soft earth to lower the profile and prevent a lucky shell from blowing the axle out from under you. It's a trick you learned from the old-timers who fought at Blood River. A lower wagon is a harder target. You watch as the British artillery, the 12-pounders, begin to unlimber. This is the part where you probably would unsurvive if you just sat there like a duck in a pond. But you aren't just sitting. The laager is designed with sally ports, small gaps in the wagon line that allow your scouts to slip out on horseback, take a few harassing shots, and lead the British into a frustrated pursuit. It's a psychological game. You want them to think the laager is the main prize, while your best marksmen are actually crawling through the grass 500 yards to their left. You're using the wagons as an anchor, a fixed point in a shifting sea of guerrilla maneuvers. There's a quiet joke among the commandos that a Boer only feels safe when he has a wagon wheel to lean against. It's your kitchen, your armory, and your bedroom. As you look around the interior of the circle, you see the oxen have been moved to the center for protection. Their low grunting and the smell of their hides are a constant reminder of what's at stake. If you lose the oxen, the fortress is dead. It becomes a wooden coffin. So, you've reinforced the outer perimeter with extra planks of sneezewood, known for being so dense and toxic to insects that it never rots and can practically deflect a low-velocity bullet. You've turned a tool of peace into a cage of war. The British bugle sounds a high, lonely note that carries across the veldt. They are beginning their advance. You settle into your spot, resting your rifle on a heavy bag of flour. The flour is great. If a bullet hits it, it just plugs the hole. It's another one of those primitive solutions that works better than the high-tech gear. You take a final look at your wagon, the jawbone that has carried your family across 3 provinces. It's creaking slightly in the wind, almost as if it's bracing itself for the impact. You aren't just a farmer anymore. You're the commander of a 5'10" mobile redoubt, and the British Empire is about to find out that you can simply march through a wall of Boer grit. You feel a strange sense of pride. The British are used to fighting people who charge at them with spears or stand in rows to be mowed down. They've never fought a fortress that can pack up and disappear at 4 miles an hour. They've never fought an army where every man is his own quartermaster and every wagon is a tactical bastion. The first British officer reaches the 1,000-yard mark. You take a deep breath, hold it, and wait for the signal. The past isn't just being unlocked, it's being weaponized. And the result is a paralysis that will baffle the London newspapers for months to come. The British are closing the distance, and you realize that the strength of this mobile fortress doesn't just lie in the wood of the wagons. But in the eyes of the men peering through the spokes, you are a product of the veldt. and your apprenticeship began the moment you were old enough to hold a Boer or an old flintlock. By the time you were 10, you were expected to bring home a springbok with a single shot to the head. Using 2 bullets was considered a waste of money and a personal embarrassment. This isn't just about marksmanship, it's about a relationship with distance and light. Growing up in the high veldt, where the air is so thin and clear, you can see for 50 miles. Juve developed a Hunter SI that makes the British soldier S training look like child S play. They were taught to fire in volleys, aiming at a mass of men on a command. You were taught to aim at the 3rd brass button on a man's tunic. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boers were among the finest natural marksmen in the world, largely because ammunition was expensive and every shot had to count for a meal. But there's a deeper, more tactical layer to this. You don't just see a target, you see the wind drift over the grass, the heat shimmer distorting the range, and the way a man's shoulder drops before he moves. Behind the protection of your wagon, you have the luxury of patience. You aren't standing in a red coat, shivering with nerves, while a sergeant screams at you to keep your chin up. You are sitting comfortably on a sack of grain, your Mauser rested on a wooden strut, waiting for the perfect moment. Historians still argue whether the Boer marksmanship was a myth, exaggerated by defeated British officers to save face, but the staggering casualty rates among British officers suggest otherwise. You've heard a quirky, slightly grim tidbit that some of the older commandos believe you can scent a British column before you see it. They claim the smell of the English tobacco and the distinctive soap used by the officers carries on the breeze for miles. Whether that's true, or just a bit of frontline sarcasm, you certainly have the home field advantage when it comes to visual processing. You've learned to spot the flash of a polished belt buckle or the glint of a monocle from a mile away. To you, the British are like bright neon signs walking across a dull brown stage. You, however, are wearing the colors of the earth khaki brown and gray blending into the shadow of your wagon so perfectly that a British scout could be 50 yards away and never realize he is looking right at you. There's a quiet sarcasm that runs through the commando when you talk about British musketry training. You've heard they practice on fixed targets at known distances on flat ranges in England. Out here, the ground is never flat, the distance is never known, and the target is usually moving behind a rock. You've spent your life judging distance by eye, a skill you call off-stand scat. You know that a man looks like a small dot at 800 yards, but at 600, you can start to see his limbs. At 400, he's yours. Behind the wagon, you've actually marked out certain rocks or bushes at specific intervals 200, 400, 600 yards, creating a pre-calibrated kill zone. It's like having a modern rangefinder made of stones and shrubs. As the British line hits the 600 mark, you feel the tension in the laager tighten. No one fires. Not yet. You wait for the veldt to give the word. You watch a British lieutenant waving his sword, trying to keep his men in a neat, straight line. It's a beautiful sight. Honestly, like a choreographed dance. You almost feel bad for him. He's playing by the rules of a game you've already won. You've heard that the British Army actually discouraged individual aim for a long time, fearing that soldiers would waste ammo or lose discipline. To you, that sounds like a death wish. Every man in this circle is his own general, his own scout, and his own sniper. You aren't just a cog in a machine. You are the machine. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen joke your cousin made earlier? Well, it wasn't entirely a joke. The sun on the veldt can blister a man's face in an hour, and the glare off a rifle barrel can give away a position instantly. You've rubbed your barrel with animal fat and soot to dull the shine, and you're wearing a wide-brimmed hat that breaks up the silhouette of your head. These little details of veldcraft are what make you a ghost in the grass. The British, with their pipe-clayed belts and shiny buttons, might as well be wearing targets on their chests. You take a slow, steady breath, the smell of the dry grass filling your senses, and settle your cheek against the cool walnut stock of your rifle. The order finally comes a low, pass-a-down whistle. You don't fire a massive, ear-splitting volley. Instead, it's a rhythmic, surgical pop-up from different points around the laager. You see the British line ripple. A horse goes down, then a sergeant, then a man carrying a signaling flag. The confusion is immediate. They can't see where the fire is coming from because you're using that smokeless powder. And the wagons break up the sound of the reports, making it bounce off the ridges like a ventriloquist's trick. It's the paralysis beginning to set in. They want to charge, but charge at what? a pile of wood and some thorn bushes. They want to fire back, but they're shooting at shadows and canvas. A British soldier, braver or perhaps more terrified than the rest, starts to run toward your wagon. You watch him through your sights. He's stumbling over the uneven ground, his heavy boots not meant for this terrain. You feel a pang of something not quite pity, but a recognition of the sheer mismatch. He's a city boy from Manchester or London, thrust into a world of endless space and invisible death. You let out half a breath, wait for the beat between his heartbeats, and squeeze the trigger. The recoil is a familiar kick against your shoulder, a physical connection to the wagon you're leaning against. He goes down in a heap of khaki, and the rest of his unit dives for cover that isn't there. This is the reality of the Boer marksman. It's not about being a hero, it's about being a professional. You've turned your hunting skills into a tactical nightmare for the British. They are realizing far too late that the peasant they came to suppress is actually a high-precision instrument of war. And the best part? You have 1,000 more rounds tucked away in the trap of the wagon, and your dinner is already drying on the line inside the circle. You can do this all day. They, on the other hand, are standing in the sun with limited water and a growing realization that the mobile fortress in front of them is just a barrier as a predator. As the British line falters under that first surgical sting of rifle fire, you witness the true beauty of your situation, the flying column effect. To the British, a military unit is a massive, slow-moving organism that requires days of planning to reposition. To you, mobility is as natural as breathing. You aren't just a static fort, you are a ghost that can pack its bags and vanish into the purple haze of the mountains before the British can even fill out their casualty reports. This is the tactical paralysis in its purest form. The British commander is likely staring through his field glasses, trying to decide whether to commit his entire brigade to an assault on your laager. But by the time he makes that decision, you'll be 5 miles away, harassing his rear guard from a completely different set of ridges. It is a mainstream historical fact that the Boer Commando system was one of the most successful decentralized military structures in history. There are no heavy supply depots to protect, no permanent barracks to defend. Your base is wherever your wagon stops, turning its wheels. This flexibility allowed you to execute what historians call a war of movement that drove the British generals to the brink of insanity. You've heard the stories of General Christian de Wet, a man who became a legend for slipping through British cordons like water through a sieve. He once famously led a column of wagons and men over a mountain pass that the British engineers had officially declared impassable. You smile to yourself. Impassable is just a British word, for we don't want to get our boots dirty. There's a quirky, almost unbelievable bit of history regarding how you manage this speed. You don't just rely on the oxen for the long hauls. You have a spare string of horses trotting alongside the wagons. Each commando usually has 2 or even 3 horses, allowing you to rotate them so there's always a fresh mount ready for a pursuit or a quick retreat. While the British cavalry horses heavy, grained beasts from Europe are collapsing from horse sickness and lack of forage. Your hardy little ponies are thriving on the scrub. You've even learned to teach your horses to ground rein, meaning they'll stand perfectly still in the middle of a chaotic gunfight just because you dropped the reins on the dirt. It's like having a self-parking getaway car that doesn't need gasoline. Historians still argue whether the Boers could have won the war outright if they had stayed aggressive and captured the coastal ports early on. But you know that your strength is unseen holding territory at S in making the British regret every inch of territory they take. You see it in the way the British infantry is now hunkered down in the dirt, pinned by the threat of your presence. They are paralyzed. They can't move forward because of your fire, and they can't move back because they have orders to advance. They are trapped in a tactical no-man's land created by a few wagons and a dozen determined men. You're playing a game of cat and mouse, but you've realized that a sufficiently motivated mouse can eventually trip the cat into a deep, dark well. The sarcasm of the situation really hits home when you see the British start to bring up their traction. Engines, those massive steam-belching iron monsters that were supposed to revolutionize transport in the colonies. They look like something out of a Jules Verne novel, all brass pipes and black smoke. You watch one of them attempt to cross a sandy riverbed a mile off, only to see its massive iron wheels dig a hole straight to the center of the earth. It's hilarious, really. They brought the Industrial Revolution to a place that only respects the ox. While they spend the next 6 hours trying to winch that iron beast out of the mud, you've already outspanned had a pipe of tobacco. and shifted your wagon 50 yards to a better firing position. You feel the rhythm of the flying column in your bones. It's a constant state of ready. Every crate in your wagon is lashed down with Ream's rawhide thongs that tighten as they dry, ensuring that when you have to move fast over rocky ground, your teeth might rattle, but your equipment won't fall out. You've even developed a way to trek at night, using the stars of the Southern Cross to navigate the trackless veldt. The British hate the night. It's when their maps stop making sense and their nerves start to fray. To you, the night is just a cooler version of the day, a perfect time to relocate your fortress and start the cycle of paralysis all over again in a new location. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier? Well, mobility requires its own kind of skin-thick, weathered, and resistant to the elements. You spend so much time in the saddle and on the wagon tongue that you start to feel like part of the machinery. You aren't a soldier who goes to the front. The front is wherever you and your wagon happen to be. You see the British officers trying to maintain a front line with colored pins on a map in a tent, somewhere in Cape Town. They don't realize that the pins are moving faster than the ink can dry. You are a fluid enemy in a static world. The sun begins to dip toward the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the grass. The British have stopped their advance for the day, beginning the laborious process of setting up a formal camp tents in straight lines. Sentries at regular intervals, the whole theatrical production. You, on the other hand, are already beginning to inspect. There's no bugle call, just a quiet murmur among the men. The oxen are brought back to the wagons, their heavy yokes sliding into place with a familiar clatter. In 30 minutes, the laager will be gone. The British will wake up to find an empty ridge and the cold ashes of a few dung fires. They'll search for you, but you'll be 20 miles to the north, sitting behind another ridge, waiting for them to wake up and start the march again. This is the secret of how the farm wagon paralyzed an empire. It wasn't by being a better tank than the British had. It was by being a tank that didn't need a road. Juve unlocked a tactical truth that will be studied for 100 years in a vast landscape. Speed and flexibility are more protective than any inch of armor plate. You take one last look at the British campfires, a faint glow in the gathering dark, and give the signal to move. The wagon groans, the wheels turn, and you melt back into the shadows of the veldt, a ghost in a wooden shell. As you pull away from the ridge and settle into the rhythmic swaying of the wagon, you take a moment to clean your rifle by the light of a small lantern. The weight of the weapon is comforting, a piece of precision German engineering that feels almost out of place in this rugged 19th century setting. You're holding a Mauser model, 1895. And in your opinion, Han, the opinion of almost every man in your commando wit, is the finest instrument of death ever devised. While the British are carrying the Lee Metford or the new Lee Enfield, you have the advantage of a 5-round clip system. You can strip feed 5 rounds into your magazine in a single motion, whereas the poor British regulars are often still fumbling with individual cartridges or a magazine system that was at the time ironically designed to be used as a single-shot rifle to save ammunition. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Mauser rifle was a primary reason the Boers were able to inflict such disproportionate casualties on the British. The 7x57mm round has a flatter trajectory and a higher velocity than the British. 303, meaning you, Dan T., have to guess as much about the drop of the bullet over long distances. If you aim at a man's chest at 500 yards, you're probably going to hit him in the chest. But a quirky bit of ballistic history that most people forget. The Boers absolutely loved the Spitzer or pointed bullet. These rounds were aerodynamic marvels that sliced through the thin mountain air of the Highveld with terrifying efficiency. Historians still argue whether the war was won or lost on the floor of the arms factories in Oberndorf, Germany. But when you're the one pulling the trigger, the debate feels pretty settled. You've heard the British soldiers complaining that your Mausers sound different. There is a sharp, whip-like crack to a Mauser shot that differs from the deeper boom of the British Lee Metford. This crack is the sound of the bullet breaking the sound barrier. And because you're using smokeless powder, the legendary Powder B, or similar nitrocellulose variants, there's no telltale puff of white smoke to give your position away. You can lie in a patch of scrub, fire 10 rounds, and the British will spend 20 minutes shooting at a rock 300 yards away from you because they find the source of the noise. It's the ultimate stealth technology of the 1890s. You re-essentially a sniper in a world. that is still trying to figure out how to hide a bright red coat behind a brown bush. Sarcasm is your best defense against the sheer numbers the British bring to the field. You've heard that the British Army High Command initially thought the Mauser was too complicated for a common soldier. You find that hilarious as you watch a 16-year-old Boer boy strip his Mauser bolt down to the firing pin, clean it with a bit of rag soaked in animal fat, and reassemble it in the dark. To you, the rifle isn't a piece of equipment issued by a government. It's a personal possession, often bought with your own money or provided by the Republic as a sacred trust. You know its quirks, its point of aim, and exactly how much the wind will push that 7mm bullet at dawn versus midday. The British, Le Metford on the other hand, still used black powder in its early marks, which created a massive cloud of smoke. You remember one of the old-timers laughing about how the British literally telegraphed their positions. "Look for the white cloud," he'd say, and aim 2 feet below the center of it. It's like playing a video game where the enemy is highlighted in neon. Even when they switched to cordite, their version of smokeless powder, the residue was so corrosive that it would eat the rifling out of their barrels if they did clean them every few hours. Your Mauser, however, is a workhorse. It can handle the grit, the heat, and the occasional lack of cleaning, and still hold a grouping that would make a competition shooter jealous. Their S, a legendary, and perhaps slightly exaggerated, a story that some Boers could shoot the head off a dickup bird at 200 yards while standing on a moving wagon. While that might be a bit of campfire bravado, the reality isn't far off. V practiced snap shooting, the ability to raise your rifle and fire a focused shot in under 2 seconds since you were big enough to lift the barrel. The Mauser's sights are graduated up to 2,000 meters, which is optimistic for most men. But in the hands of a Boer who understands the atmospheric pressure of the veldt, it makes long-range harassment a very real nightmare for British logistics. You don't even have to kill them. You just have to hit a horse or a water barrel at 1,000 yards to bring a whole column to a grinding halt. You look at the bandolier slung over your shoulder. Each pocket holds a 5-round clip. You can fire all 25 rounds in about a minute if you're pushed. That volume of fire from a small group of hidden men is what leads British officers to report that they were attacked by hundreds of Boers, when in reality, it was just you, your brother, and a couple of cousins sitting behind a wagon. It's a psychological paralysis. They think they outnumbered because they can imagine a few men could produce that much lead so accurately. The Mauser, gift to the guerrilla, the ability to punch way above your weight class. The wagon continues to creak, the wooden axles singing their own low song as you finish oiling the bolt. You slide it back into the receiver with a satisfying clack-clack. It's a sound of certainty. You've heard that some British officers tried to buy Mausers from captured Boers because they realized their own rifles were inferior. Imagine that, the greatest empire on earth, and their officers are trying to upgrade to the enemy's gear. It's a bit like a modern soldier trying to trade his high-tech rifle for a sturdy, reliable old AK-47 because the high-tech one keeps jamming in the sand. As you tuck the rifle back into its leather scabbard fixed to the wagon's frame, you feel a sense of technological superiority that offsets the British numerical advantage. They have the Gatling guns and the naval cannons, yes, but you have the people's rifle. You have the weapon that turned every farmer into a long-distance threat. The Mauser isn't just a gun, it's the key that unlocked the paralysis of the British Army. Tomorrow morning, when the sun touches the tops of the copies, that German steel will speak again, and another British column will find itself pinned down, wondering why they can't see the men who are hitting them from half a mile away. The wagon comes to a soft halt in a shallow depression, and you find yourself looking out into the pitch-black void of the veldt. It's here, in the silence of the night, that you realize your greatest weapon is owned to the Mauser, or the wagon itself. The fact that, to the British, you have become functionally invisible. You've mastered the art of being nowhere. A tactical ghostliness that has turned the pride of the British Army into a nervous, stationary wreck. While they are building massive, brightly lit camps, with sentries shouting all's well every hour, you are melting into the shadows. You've learned that a man who doesn't want to be seen can be caught, especially when he uses the earth itself as his primary camouflage. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boers were pioneers in the use of extensive, concealed trench systems and the exploitation of natural cover. At the Battle of Colenso, the British artillery hammered the ridges for hours. Assuming you were perched on the heights in traditional defensive positions, they wasted thousands of shells on empty rocks because you were actually tucked into narrow, deep trenches right at the river's edge, invisible until they were practically stepping on you. Historians still argue whether this was a deliberate evolution of military theory or just the natural instinct of a hunter who knows that the best place to wait for a buck is in the tall grass, not on top of a hill. For you, it's just common sense. Why stand where they're looking? There's a quirky bit of fringe history regarding your invisibility that involves the very horses you ride. Many commandos would train their ponies to lie down on command in the tall grass. Imagine a British scout looking across a field through his binoculars. He sees nothing but waving yellow stalks. Meanwhile, 50 men and 50 horses are lying flat as pancakes just 300 yards away, hearts beating in sync with the earth. You've even heard of men weaving grass into their hats and over the backs of their jacket-surly versions of the ghillie. So to ensure that even if a British officer looks right at them, his brain only registers shrubbery. It's a level of fieldcraft that makes the British skirmishing drills look like a parade. The sarcasm of the invisible enemy isn't lost on you when you think about the British uniforms. They've finally started moving toward khaki, moving away from the thin red line of the past. But they still carry their bright white haversacks and polished brass buttons that catch the sun like a signaling mirror. You, meanwhile, look like a clump of dirt. Your clothes are stained with the dust of 3 provinces. Your beard is a tangled mess of gray and brown, and your wagon is covered in a weathered, mud-splattered canvas that looks like a rock from a distance. You aren't just hiding, you're becoming the landscape. The British are trying to conquer the land. You are simply part of it. You spend the night hunkered down in a donga dry, eroded watercourse with your wagon positioned just over the lip to provide a quick escape route. From this low vantage point, you can see the British campfires on the horizon, glowing like a city of stars. They are paralyzed by their own visibility. They can't move at night for fear of an ambush, and they can't stay still during the day without being picked off. They are a static target in a world of moving shadows. You've heard that British soldiers are genuinely terrified of the silent death, the Boer who fires a single shot from an unknown location and then vanishes without a trace. It's a psychological weight that breaks a man's spirit faster than any bayonet charge. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that often comes up in later years. Historians still argue whether the Boer use of smokeless powder was the single most important technological advantage of the war. When you're in the field, it's not a debate, it's a reality. Without that puff of white smoke, the British have no aiming point. They are firing at the sound of a crack, which, due to the acoustics of the copies, often sounds like it's coming from 3 different directions at once. UVA actually watched British batteries turn their massive cannons and blast a completely empty hillside because the echo of your rifle was more convincing than the truth. You're playing with their senses, turning the environment into a hall of mirrors. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen again. It's not just about the sun, it's about the shine. You've taken care to dull every piece of metal on your person. UVA rubbed dirt into your rifle S-bolt handle and wrapped the barrel in a strip of dull cloth. UV even painted the bright iron rims of your wagon wheels with a mixture of soot and grease to keep them from glinting in the moonlight. This obsession with dullness is what keeps you alive. In a world of high-tech empires, your greatest asset is your ability to be profoundly, boringly brown. You are the color of a dead leaf, the color of a dried riverbed, the color of the very ground the British are trying to claim. As the first hint of gray touches the eastern sky, you prepare to move again. You don't make a sound. The wagon is greased, the oxen are led into place with soft whistles, and the men communicate with hand signals. The British bugle will sound soon, a loud, brassy announcement to the world that they are awake. You, however, are already nowhere. By the time their scouts reach this donga, they'll find nothing but a few flattened patches of grass and the cold scent of a ghost. You've turned the mobile fortress into a stealth fortress, and the British columns are left punching at the wind, wondering why their maps say you're there, but their eyes say you're gone. This invisibility is the ultimate paralysis. If you can't see the enemy, you can't fight them. If you can't fight them, you can't win. You watch the British camp begin to stir, the tiny khaki figures moving like ants around their fires. They look so vulnerable in the early light, exposed and obvious. You feel a strange sense of detachment, as if you're watching a play from the wings. You are the shadow in the corner of their vision, the rustle in the grass that makes them jump. You are the Boer Commando, and as long as you remain invincible, you are invincible. You give the trek signal, and the wagon slides away into the morning mist. Another day of being nowhere beginning. As the wagon pulls further away from the British camp, your stomach gives a quiet rumble, reminding you that a ghost still needs to eat. But unlike the British regulars, who are currently waiting for a massive horse-drawn bakery or a lumbering supply train filled with bully beef and hardtack, you just reach into a small canvas bag hanging from the wagon's interior frame. You pull out a strip of biltong dark sulcured airdried meat that's as tough as a boot sole and twice as nutritious. This isn't just a snack, it's the secret fuel of the Boer mobility. It's a mainstream historical fact that the ability of the commandos to operate without a formal tail of supply wagons allowed them to outpace the British by weeks. While the empire is paralyzed by its own stomach, you are sustained by a handful of dried beef and a pocketful of rusks. You've heard the British soldiers call biltong mahogany strips, and honestly, looking at the dark, fibrous texture, you can't blame them for the sarcasm. It's not exactly a five-star meal at the Savoy in London, but it's practical. Biltong doesn't rot in the heat. It weighs almost nothing, and you can chew on a single piece for an hour while you're scouting a ridge. It provides the steady protein you need to survive 18 hours in the saddle. Historians still argue whether the British failure to adopt a similar high-protein, low-weight ration was a logistical oversight or a cultural refusal to eat peasant food. But for you, the result is clear. Their soldiers are often weak from dysentery and meager rations. While you're as lean and hard as the cattle you raised, there's a quirky, somewhat localized tradition regarding your coffee, the other half of your survival kit. Real coffee beans are a luxury now that the British have blockaded the ports, so you've become an expert in ersatz brewing. You've roasted everything from chicory and dried figs to acorns and even burnt maize. It's a bitter, dark sludge that would probably make a British officer faint, but it keeps you awake during those long, freezing nights on the high veldt. You've even heard of commandos using the leftover coffee grounds as a primitive poultice for saddle sores. It's that kind of grit that keeps the flying column moving when any civilized army would have surrendered to the fatigue. You look back at your wagoner mobile pantry. Tucked away in the corners are small bags of flour, a tin of salt, and perhaps a jar of preserved fruit from a sympathetic farmstead. You don't need a central kitchen. Each wagon is a self-contained ecosystem. If you find a springbok or a stray sheep, you have a feast. If you don't, you have your biltong. This decentralization is what truly paralyzes the British. They are looking for your supply line to cut it, but they can't find it because it doesn't exist in a linear sense. Your supply line is the entire landscape and every wagon in the commando. To stop you, they would have to stop every single wheel in the Republic. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that pops up when talking about the biltong logistics. Historians still argue whether the Boer's decentralized supply system was the first true example of modern guerrilla sustainability. When you're sitting there using your hunting knife to shave off paper-thin slices of dried meat, it doesn't feel like a system, it feels like survival. You've heard that the British are actually importing millions of tons of hay from South America just to feed their horses, while your oxen are currently grazing on whatever scrub is growing by the side of the trail. The British are trying to bring a European city's worth of infrastructure into the middle of a desert. You, meanwhile, are just a man with a wagon and a very, very long-lasting piece of beef. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen joke well. Sometimes the smells of the trail are just as intense. The scent of the biltong mixed with the smell of wood smoke and the leather of your bandolier becomes the scent of your life. It's the smell of freedom from the British Commissariat. You've seen the British supply columns, thousands of mules, hundreds of wagons, all moving at the speed of a crawling turtle. They are a massive soft target. You've spent the last month picking off the edges of those columns, taking their coffee and their sugar, and then vanishing. You aren't just eating your own rations, you're eating theirs too. Every British wagon you burn is a week of hunger for their front line. The sarcasm in the camp tonight is directed at a captured tin of British Maconochie stew someone found. It's a greasy mix of turnips and mystery meat that tastes like tin. You watch a fellow commando poke at it with a stick before tossing it into the fire. "I'll stick to the biltong," he grunts. "At least I know which cow this was." There's a quiet pride in that self-reliance. You aren't a servant of the state. You're a man providing for himself. This psychological independence is just as important as the physical biltong. Because you don't need the government to feed you. The government can't control you. As you chew the salty, peppery meat, the energy begins to return to your tired limbs. The wagon continues its steady, creaking trek toward the northern mountains. You've got enough food in this wooden box to last you until the moon changes phases, and by then, you'll have found another way to replenish. The British are tethered to the iron rails of the train tracks, slaves to their heavy tins and their slow-moving ovens. You are tethered to nothing but the horizon. You take a final sip of your bitter chicory coffee, lean back against a sack of flour, and watch the stars. You are wealthed, you are mobile, and you are ready to haunt the empire for another day. Would you like me to continue with Section 9? As the biltong settles in your stomach, you feel the wagon lurch over a particularly jagged ridge, but you don't worry about the horses pulling it. Unlike the British cavalry, who are currently watching their expensive imported thoroughbreds and Arabians drop dead by the dozen, you are mounted on a Boer. This horse is the four-legged equivalent of your Kakabinwa rugged, unassuming creature that was forged in the same harsh furnace of the Karoo. It's a mainstream historical fact that the British lost over 300,000 horses during the war, largely due to horse sickness and an inability to adapt to the local forage. Your pony, however, can survive on the literal thorns of the wait-a-bit bush and still carry you 60 miles in a single day. You aren't just riding a horse, you are riding a biological miracle of the veldt. You've heard the British officers mock your scruffy little ponies. They look for height, a groomed coat, and a graceful gait. Your horse is short, thick-necked, and has a coat as rough as a burlap sack. But the sarcasm shifts to your side of the line when you see a British Lancer brigade trying to navigate a boulder-strewn hillside. Their horses are terrified, slipping on the shale and heaving with exhaustion. Your Boerperd, meanwhile, picks its way through the rocks with the shoe-footedness of a mountain goat. These horses have developed a five-gated ability, including the triple, a smooth, rhythmic trot that allows you to cover vast distances without the bone-jarring bounce of a standard gallop. It's the difference between driving a luxury sedan on a plowed field and driving a specialized off-road tractor. There's a quirky, almost mystical bit of lore among the commandos that a Boerperd can smell water from 5 miles away and hear a British column long before the riders do. While that might be the stuff of campfire legends, it's a fact that these horses are incredibly hardy against the local diseases that decimated the British remounts. Historians still argue whether the British failure to source local horses earlier was a result of colonial prejudice or simply a lack of available stock. But the horse gap became a defining feature of the war. You've seen British mounted infantry who are effectively just infantry on walking horses. They can't chase you, and they certainly can't outrun you. To them, you are a centaur half-man, half-horse, and entirely unreachable. You reach out from the wagon and pat the neck of the pony tied to the tailboard. Its skin is hot and dry, but its eyes are clear and alert. You don't feed it oats or grain from a bag. You let it graze whenever the wagon stops. This self-fueling capability is what keeps your flying column truly mobile. You've heard that the British are actually shipping compressed hay all the way from Canada and Australia. Imagine the logistics. A ship crosses the Atlantic, a train carries the hay to the front, and a dozen mules pull the hay to the horse. By the time the horse eats, it has cost the British taxpayer a small fortune. Your horse just eats the grass under its feet. It's a quirky bit of irony that the empire's wealth is being defeated by the very dirt it's trying to buy. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that resonates here. Historians still argue whether the Boerperd's stamina was the true engine of the guerrilla phase of the war. When you're in the saddle for 14 hours, dodging a British pincer movement, it doesn't feel like a debate. It feels like the only thing keeping you out of a Prisoner-of war camp. You've learned to sleep in the saddle, your body swaying in time with the pony's triple. You've even learned to use your horse as a tactical shield. In a pinch, a well-trained Boerperd will stand perfectly still while you use its saddle as a rifle rest. The bond between the commando and his horse isn't one of master and servant. It's a partnership of survival. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen again. Well, the horses have their own version of veldt. You've seen men rub their horses down with a mixture of vinegar and water to keep the flies away, or use tobacco juice to treat saddle sores. These are the primitive solutions that keep a horse in the field for 2 years. While the British Veterinary Corps is overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the mortality rate, the British are trying to run a war on specs and regulations. You are running a war on instinct and local knowledge. You know which plants are poisonous and which river crossings have a firm bottom. Your horse knows it too. The sarcasm in the commando grows when you pass a remount depot the British have established. It's a graveyard of fine European horseflesh, animals that simply weren't built for a world without stables and grooming. You look at your pony, its mane tangled with burrs, and its flanks dusty. And you wouldn't trade it for the finest stallion in the Queen's stables. This horse is your ticket to the horizon. It's the reason the British columns are paralyzed. They can't catch what they can't keep up with. Every time they think they've cornered you, you and your pony find a goat track over a ridge and vanish. As the wagon continues its creaking journey, you watch the moon reflect in the eyes of the horses trotting alongside. They are the silent partners in this unlocking of the past. By using a breed of horse that was nearly forgotten by the rest of the world, you've maintained a level of mobility that the modern British Army can't even comprehend. You aren't just moving across the veldt, you are part of the veldt's own movement. You lean back against the canvas, the steady clop-clop of the Boerpert's hooves a lullaby of endurance. Tomorrow, that endurance will be the difference between a successful ambush and a desperate retreat. And you put your faith in the horse that the Empire overlooked. The morning sun is barely a sliver of fire on the horizon when the paralysis you've been cultivating finally snaps into a violent reality. A British cavalry squadron, desperate to prove they can still catch a farmer in a wagon, has spotted your tracks and decided to commit to a full-speed charge. You don't panic. You don't even whip the oxen into a frenzy. Instead, you whistle a sharp descending note, and the lead wagon begins a tight, practiced arc. Within minutes, the 5 wagons of your small unit are locked together. This is where the wagon proves it is more than a transport. It is a literal wooden wall. You aren't just standing in the open like a target. You are hunkered behind a ton of seasoned yellow wood and iron reinforced wheels. You watch the cavalry come a wave of flashing sabers and thundering hooves, and you realize that against a laager, they might as well be charging a brick wall with toothpicks. It's a mainstream historical fact that the British cavalry charge, once the terror of European battlefields, was rendered almost entirely obsolete by the Boers' use of the wagon as a defensive anchor. The horses of the British 5th Lancers, or the 10th Hussars, are magnificent beasts, but they cannot jump a 6-foot wooden barricade laced with thorn bushes. As they hit the 200-yard mark, the fortress begins to breathe fire. You rest your mouser on the heavy iron rim of the rear wheel, using the spokes as a ready-made firing slit. The cavalrymen are upright, exposed, and focused on the speed of their charge, while you are a stationary, protected marksman with a clear field of fire. Historians still argue whether the British continued these suicidal charges out of a romantic obsession with the heroic era of warfare or a genuine lack of tactical alternatives. For you, the sarcasm is thick. You've heard British officers claim that infantry wins battles, but cavalry wins glory. You wonder how much glory there is in a dirt trench. There's a quirky bit of fringe history that says some commandos actually attached long, sharpened poles to their wagon wheels, like the chariots of old, just in case a horse got too close. Whether that was a common practice or just an isolated bit of Boer ingenuity, the psychological effect was the same. The cavalry charge, intended to shatter your nerves, instead shatters against your wooden shell. You see the lead officer, a man with a mustache so perfect it must take an hour of grooming raising his sword for the final gallop. You feel a brief moment of you probably wouldn't survive this clarity on his behalf. At 50 yards, you squeeze the trigger. The Mauser's recoil is absorbed by the solid wood of the wagon. The officer's horse doesn't even fall. It just veers off as the rider slides out of the saddle, his glory ending in a cloud of karoo dust. The rest of the squadron realizes the trap too late. They can get around the wagons, because you've positioned them between 2 impassable rocky outcrops. They are funneled into a kill zone that you and your cousins have been pre-measuring all morning. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that often pops up when discussing these encounters. Historians still argue whether the laager was the direct ancestor of the modern armored personnel carrier. Looking at the way the British bullets are thudding harmlessly into the thick planks of your wagon's side, it's hard to disagree. You've even stuffed the bed of the wagon with wool bales, which are famous for catching bullets and holding them like a sponge. It's a soft armor solution that is surprisingly effective. You hear a dull thwack as a .303 round hits the wood 6 inches from your head. You don't even flinch. You just cycle the bolt and find your next target. The sarcasm of the situation peaks when the remaining cavalrymen try to use their carbines from horseback. Firing a rifle while bouncing on a galloping horse is about as effective as throwing rocks at the moon. You, meanwhile, have a steady rest, a shaded position, and a rifle that doesn't miss. You see the confusion in their eyes, the realization that the noble art of war has been replaced by the brutal efficiency of the farm. They are paralyzed by the sheer unfairness of it. They want a duel, you are giving them a slaughter. You've turned your clumsy transport into a naval broadside on land, and the British are sinking in a sea of grass. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, right now, the only thing you re-smelling is the acrid scent of cordite and the iron-rich smell of the dust kicked up by the retreating horses. The charge has broken. The survivors are galloping back to the safety of their distant artillery, leaving their fallen behind. You don't cheer, you don't celebrate. You just take a rag and wipe the grit off your rifle sights. You've seen this before, and you'll see it again. The wagon has done its job. It provided the protection and the platform that allowed a handful of men to stop 100. You look at the wood of your wagon. There are a few new splinters, a few lead-grease streaks where bullets grazed the paint, but the Kakabinwa is still standing. It hasn't moved an inch. This is the mobile fortress at its most literal. It didn't just carry your food, it carried your life through the storm. You've heard that the British are beginning to develop armored trains to counter your tactics, but a train is stuck on a track. Your wagon can go anywhere, the oxen can walk. You are the master of the Afroad fortress, and as long as you have a wheel to hide behind, the British Empire's might is just a target. As the dust settles, the command comes to outspan the danger has passed for now, and the oxen need to be moved away from the scent of blood before they spook. You jump down from the wagon, your legs feeling a bit stiff from the tension. You walk over to where the British officer fell and find his sword lying in the dirt, a piece of beautiful, useless steel. You pick it up, look at your reflection in the blade, and then use it to scrape some of the caked mud off your wagon's wheel. It's a bit of frontier sarcasm that your comrades appreciate. The fortress is ready to move again. The past has once again paralyzed the present, and the horizon is calling your name. The dust from the failed cavalry charge has barely settled before you find yourself looking into the hollow eyes of a captured British scout. He's shivering, not from the cold eats, nearly 90 degrees, but from the sheer, unsettling silence of the veldt and the ghosts who inhabit it. This is the psychological front of the war, where you use the vast, empty landscape to systematically dismantle the morale of the British regulars. You aren't just fighting their bodies, you are fighting their minds. To a boy from the cramped streets of East London, this level of isolation is terrifying. You, however, thrive in it. You've turned the mobile fortress into a tool of psychological paralysis, making the British feel like they are being watched by 10,000 eyes when there are only 50 of you hidden in the rocks. It's a mainstream historical fact that as the war dragged on, the British Army suffered from a phenomenon they called Boerfunke, state of constant, low-level anxiety that made even the most seasoned soldiers jumpy at the sound of a twig snapping. You've cultivated this through the Bitterender spirit, the Bitterenders who refuse to give up even when the official governments have fled. You don't need a capital city to fight for. You are fighting for the very dirt under your wagon wheels. This ideological grit is something the British High Command simply can't quantify in their reports. Historians still argue whether the Bitterenders were heroic patriots or stubborn holdouts who unnecessarily prolonged the suffering, but out here, the only thing that matters is that you are still standing and the British are still scared. There's a quirky, psychological bit of fringe history regarding how you play with the British nerves at night. Some commandos have been known to tie lanterns to the horns of a few stray cattle and drive them across a distant ridge. From the British camp, it looks like a massive column of Boer wagons moving in the dark. They spend all night on high alert, firing their expensive artillery at ghosts, while you and your actual unit are 5 miles away, sleeping soundly in the shade of your real wagons. It's a bit of frontier sarcasm that yields high results. You trade the cost of a few candles for the total exhaustion of a British brigade. You're living rent-free in their heads, and the rent is paid in their dwindling sanity. The British are trying to map you, but how do you map the wind? You see their officers constantly checking their topographical charts, trying to find strategic points to occupy. But in a war of mobile fortresses, there are no strategic points, only the wagon and the horizon. You've heard that the British soldiers are often told that the Boers are barbarians or cowards who woe and fight a fair battle. You find that hilarious. If fair means standing in a line to be shot, you'll take unfair every single time. This psychological gap, the difference between a soldier following orders and a man defending his home, is the invisible wall that your wagons are built upon. You sit by your wagon, carving a small piece of wood, and you can see the British column through your glasses. They look like a slow-moving, khaki-colored snake, restricted by its own weight. They are paralyzed by the fear of the next ambush. Every kopje, every dry riverbed, and every cluster of thorn bushes is a potential death trap. You've turned the entire geography of South Africa into a weapon of terror. It's an open scholarly debate phrase that historians still argue whether the psychological toll of guerrilla warfare in the veldt was the primary driver behind the eventual British adoption of scorched earth policies. They couldn't break your wagons, so they decided to break the land that fed them. There's a quiet sarcasm in the way you treat your own safety. You've learned that the best way to stay sane in this environment is to treat the war as an extension of the farm. You fix your wagon, you tend to your horses, and you wait. The British, meanwhile, are obsessing over victory and conquest. They are in a hurry. You have all the time in the world. This patience is a form of psychological armor. When you look at your kakabanua, you don't see a military asset. You see your grandmother's kitchen and your father's bed. That connection gives you a psychological resilience that no amount of British stiff upper lip can match. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, again another metaphor for the thick skin UVA developed? You've become immune to the British intimidation tactics. When they bring up their massive naval guns, the long toms or the 4.7 inchers, you don't run. You just dig a deeper hole or move the wagon another mile back. You've learned that the bigger the weapon, the slower it moves, and speed is the ultimate antidote to power. The British are trying to crush a fly with a sledgehammer, and they are becoming increasingly frustrated that the fly won't hold still. As the sun sets, casting a blood-red glow over the high veldt, you watch the British camp settle into another night of paranoid watching. You can almost feel their collective heartbeat, fast, shallow, and afraid. You, on the other hand, take a slow breath of the cooling air. You are the master of this space. The wagon is silent, the oxen are resting, and the bitter ender spirit is as strong as the iron on your wheels. You haven't just paralyzed their columns, you've paralyzed their confidence. Tomorrow, they will wake up even more tired, even more jumpy, and you will still be there, the invisible farmer in the wooden fort, waiting for them to make their next mistake. You lean back against the wagon, feeling the solid, unyielding strength of the wood. It's been through the great trek, through the battles of the past, and it will see you through this. The British have the numbers, the money, and the maps, but you have the land and the will. You close your eyes for a moment, the silence of the veldt wrapping around you like a blanket. You are a ghost in a fortress of your own making, and the Empire is just a guest in your world, a guest that is starting to realize it's no longer welcome. As you watch the British column struggle through the heat haze, you realize that your mobile fortress isn't just protected by wooden planks and Mauser bullets. It's protected by an invisible web of information. You are never truly alone on the veldt. Every smoke plume on a distant horizon, every laundry line draped over a farmhouse fence, and every child playing near a well is part of your intelligence network. This is the eyes and ears phase of the paralysis. While the British are relying on outdated maps and scouts who can barely tell a springbok from a sheep, you have the total cooperation of the local population. To the British, every farmstead is a potential enemy outpost. To you, it's a refueling station and a telegraph office that doesn't need wires. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boer intelligence system, often aided by the ZARP, South African Republic Police, and local residents, was light years ahead of the British Military Intelligence Department. You've seen it in action. A farm girl riding a pony across a ridge isn't just moving livestock. She's counting the number of British field guns and noting which officers look the most exhausted. By the time that British column reaches your position, you already know their strength, their water supply, and most importantly, their morale. Historians still argue whether the British failure to win the hearts and minds of the rural population was the single biggest factor that forced them into the brutal concentration camp strategy later in the war. For now, though, the farmsteads are your sanctuary. There's a quirky, almost domestic bit of fringe history regarding how these messages are passed. You've heard of the Boer Secret Service using code baked into loaves of bread or hidden inside the false bottoms of milk pails. My favorite bit of sarcasm. The British often searched the men, but rarely the women. assuming that gentle farm wives wouldn't be involved in the grit of war. Little did they know that the woman offering them a polite cup of tea was simultaneously memorizing the insignia on their shoulders to pass to the commando hiding in the donga behind the barn. You aren't just fighting an army, you're fighting a family business. The British are paralyzed by this information vacuum. They move through the landscape like a blind man in a dark room, occasionally bumping into things and getting hurt. They've tried to hire local scouts, but half the time, those scouts are actually your cousins leading the British into a swamp or a dead-end canyon. You've heard stories of British units marching in circles for 3 days because their guide accidentally lost the trail. You can't help but chuckle as you check your wagon's grease. The British are trying to fight a 20th century war with 19th century arrogance, and the farmsteads are the quiet classrooms where they're being taught a very expensive lesson. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen again? It's about blending in, even when you're standing right in front of them? You've seen commandos walk right into British-occupied towns dressed as simple laborers, buy a bag of tobacco, listen to the soldiers' gossip in the tavern, and walk out with the entire British battle plan for the next week. This intelligence network means your wagon is never caught by surprise. You are always the one choosing the ground for the fight. You are the one who knows where the mobile fortress needs to be to cause the most chaos. An open scholarly debate phrase that often surfaces here. Historians still argue whether the British blockhouse system was a desperate attempt to sever this intelligence network or a purely tactical move to protect the railways. Regardless of the reason, you see the farmsteads as the vital organs of your resistance. Without the biltong, the fresh horses, and the whispered warnings from the farmhouses, your wagon would just be a piece of wood. With them, it is the center of a ghost empire. You feel a deep sense of gratitude for the people who risk everything to keep you informed. They are the invisible soldiers standing behind your wagon wheels. You watch a small boy waving from a distance. He's holding a piece of white cloth knot in surrender, but in a specific pattern that tells you the British cavalry has split into 2 groups. You signal back with a quick flash of a mirror, the helograph of the poor man. In 10 minutes, you VA outspanned and shifted your wagon behind a ridge that the British didn't even know was there. This is the unlocking of the past through the lens of community. The British are a foreign body being rejected by the landscape. You are the landscape itself, responding to a threat. The sarcasm of the intelligence gap hits its peak when you think about the British pigeon posts and heavy telegraph equipment. They spend hours setting up wires that you just snip under the cover of darkness. They send pigeons that your marksmen occasionally use for target practice and a midday snack. Meanwhile, your telegraph is a child on a pony and a woman with a keen eye for detail. It's faster, it's more reliable, and it's completely invisible to the high-tech sensors of the Empire. You are the masters of the Lofi War. As the sun begins to bake the ground, you settle back into the shadow of the wagon. You have the information you need. You know exactly where the British are going, and you know they have no idea you're here. You take a bite of an apple given to you by a farm wife 3 miles back. It's crisp, sweet, and tastes like victory. The British are paralyzed by their own isolation, but you are part of a living, breathing network that stretches from the Cape to the Limpopo. You aren't just a man with a gun. You are the sharp end of a very angry, very well-informed nation. The heat of the day finally breaks, replaced by the sudden, sharp chill of a high veldt evening. You sit on the tongue of your wagon, the wood cooling beneath you, and watch the stars ignite one by one in a sky so clear it feels like you could reach up and pluck a diamond from the belt of Orion. This is the quiet heart of the Commando Lythanites, on the high veldt, while the British are likely huddled in their tents. Dreaming of damp London streets and complaining about the ghastly African cold, you feel a profound sense of belonging. The isolation that terrifies them is your sanctuary. This cultural grit, forged over centuries of trekking and frontier living, is the invisible mortar holding your mobile fortress together. You aren't just enduring the night, you are owning it. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boers' ability to endure extreme environmental shifts gave them a massive physiological and psychological edge. One day, it's 100 degrees in the shade. The next morning, there's frost on your woolen blanket. British regulars, often recruited from urban centers, struggled with veldt sores and respiratory issues caused by the dust and the fluctuating temperatures. You, however, were raised in this climate. You know how to trap the heat of a small dung fire under the wagon and how to wrap your feet in sheepskin to prevent frostbite. Historians still argue whether this environmental hardiness was more important than the Boers' tactical brilliance. But as you watch a British sentry a mile away shivering so hard his rifle rattles, the answer seems pretty clear. There's a quirky, almost poetic bit of fringe history regarding the songs of the laager. When the British weren't close enough to hear, the commandos would gather around a low fire for the singing of rugged Calvinist psalms. These weren't soft, melodic hymns. They were deep, booming chants that sounded like the earth itself was speaking. Sarcasm often crept into the camp life too. You've heard men make up mocking verses about Lord Kitchener's beard, or the way British officers walk as if they have a ramrod stuck down their backs. This humor is your pressure valve. It keeps the bittering spirit from curdling into despair. You've heard that the British are actually banned from singing certain songs because it lowers discipline. To you, the song is the discipline. The silence of the high veldt is heavy, broken only by the occasional lowing of an ox or the distant haunting cry of a black-backed jackal. You realize that your wagon has become more than a fort. It's a cathedral of memories. You look at the initials carved into the sideboards by your father and the small bloodstain on the floorboards from when your brother was wounded at Spion Kop. These aren't just vehicles. They are the physical vessels of your history. The British are fighting for a flag and an abstract concept of empire. You are fighting for the very wood you're leaning against. This cultural grit means that even when you are outnumbered 10-1, you don't feel small. You feel like the entire history of your people is standing in the circle with you. There is an open, scholarly debate phrase that often surfaces in discussions about Boer morale. Historians still argue whether the religious conviction of the Boers acted as a force multiplier or a source of tactical rigidity. You've seen both. Sometimes a commander will wait for a sign before moving, which can be frustrating. But more often, that unwavering belief that the land is yours by divine right makes you a terrifying opponent. You don't fear death the way the British do, because you believe your path is already written. It's a psychological paralysis for the enemy. They can understand how a man can be so calm while being hunted by the world's largest army. You'll remember that crocodile dung sunscreen jacket as a reminder of how you use everything the land gives you. Tonight, the gift is the cold. It keeps the British inside their perimeter, huddled around their smoky coal fires. They hate the dark. To them, the night belongs to the Boer ghosts. You use this fear, you and a few others might slip out into the darkness, not to attack, but just to move a few rocks, or neigh, like a horse, near their lines. It keeps them awake, keeps them jumpy, and ensures that by morning, they are too tired to mount a proper pursuit. You are the masters of asymmetric exhaustion. The sarcasm in the camp tonight is directed at the British comforts found in a captured supply: wagon bottles of lavender, water, and tins of fancy biscuits. You toss a biscuit to your dog and keep the lavender water to grease a squeaky hinge on the wagon S-brake. The contrast is almost comical. The British are trying to bring a civilization that requires a bathtub and a butler into a wilderness that only respects the rifle and the rain. You've learned to find comfort in a dry piece of biltong and the warmth of your horse S-neck. This is the unlocking of the pastoral lying on the old ways to survive a modern onslaught. As the moon reaches its zenith, casting long silver shadows across the grass, you wrap your coat tighter and settle into a light sleep. The wagon is solid, the air is clean, and the enemy is far enough away to be a problem for tomorrow. You feel a strange sense of peace. The British may have the gold of the Rand and the steel of Sheffield, but they do have the ability to sit in the silence of the veldt and feel at home. You are the bitter ender. And as long as the high veldt nights are cold and the stars are bright, you will remain unbowed. Close your eyes. The rhythmic breathing of the oxen, a comforting background hum. Tomorrow will bring more dust, more heat, and more lead. But tonight, you are just a man on a mountain, protected by a wooden fort and a history that refuses to be forgotten. The Empire thinks they are winning because they are taking the towns, but you know the truth. As long as you have the night, you have the war. As the sun begins to bake the frost off the canvas of your wagon, you watch the British column through your binoculars and notice something different. They are moving with a newfound, agonizing slowness. They've finally started to realize that their massive, miles-long supply trains are nothing more than a buffet for your commandos. This is the stage of the war where the British attempt their first clumsy countermoves. They are trying to catch the wind, and you can't help but feel a surge of sarcasm as you watch them struggle. They've started stripping down their infantry, taking away the heavy packs, and trying to create their own mounted infantry units. They want to be like you, but you can turn a city-born factory worker into a veldt-bred hunter with a 3-week training course and a khaki shirt. It's a mainstream historical fact that the British Army underwent a massive tactical overhaul during the Boer War. Moving away from the rigid, shoulder-to-shoulder formations that had defined the Victorian era, they began to emphasize individual initiative and fire and movement. However, the adaptation was painfully slow. You see British soldiers trying to take cover behind small rocks while still wearing their shiny belt buckles and carrying heavy, rattling water bottles. They look like nervous recruits trying to play a game of hide-and-seek against a professional assassin. Historians still argue whether the British ever truly mastered the art of the veldt, or if they simply won through a sheer, overwhelming war of attrition that exhausted the Boer resources. There's a quirky bit of fringe history regarding the counter-guerrilla tactics the British tried to employ. They actually started bringing in scouts from other parts of the empire, men from the Australian outback, the Canadian prairies, and the New Zealand bush, hoping that these colonels would be a match for the Boers. You've had run-ins with these bush-filled carbineers, and you'll admit they're tougher than the London boys. They know how to ride and shoot, but they don't know this land. They don't know that the water in this specific pan is alkaline, or that this particular ridge has a hidden goat track on the northern face. You still have the home field advantage, and the British counter-move is often just a faster way for them to get lost. The sarcasm of the modernized British Army is evident in their new equipment. They've brought in pom-pom Vickers, Maxim 37mm, autocannons. These things fire a stream of small, explosive shells with a terrifying pom-pom sound. The first time you heard it, your heart skipped a beat. But then you realized that against a scattered, invisible enemy hidden behind wagon wheels and deep dongas, the pom-pom is mostly just a psychological weapon. It makes a lot of noise and kicks up a lot of dust. But unless they get a direct hit on a wagon, it's just expensive fireworks. You've even seen boys in your commando compete to see who can tease a pom-pom crew into wasting their ammo by waving a hat on a stick. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen against about being smarter, not just tougher. The British countermove also involved trying to mimic your flying columns. They created smaller, more mobile units that supposedly weren't tied to the wagons. But here's the joke. They still need their tea, their canned mutton, and their high-quality horse feed. Their mobile columns are still 3 times heavier than yours. You watch them through the shimmer of the heat, trailing their own dust clouds like a "Here I Am" sign. You, meanwhile, have split your commando into groups of 5. You are a swarm of bees. They are a bear trying to swat you with a heavy, clumsy paw. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that often pops up here. Historians still argue whether the British New Model Army was actually effective or if the Boers were simply worn down by the sheer scale of the blockade. From your perspective, the British are definitely getting better, but they are still fighting a war of regulations. If a British officer sees a situation that isn't in his manual, he freezes. He has to send a runner to a colonel, who sends a signal to a general. By the time the order comes back to attack, you've already outspanned, finished your coffee, and moved to ridges over. Their hierarchy is their biggest handicap. You look at your wagon, the wooden jawbone that has survived another week of pursuit. UV reinforced the brake handle with a bit of scavenged British telegraph wire. A little bit of frontier irony you quite enjoy. The British are trying to cage you, building their lines of blockhouses and stringing miles of barbed wire across the plains. They are trying to turn the infinite veldt into a series of small, manageable boxes. It's a desperate move, an admission that they can't beat you in the open. They've realized they can't catch the wind, so they're trying to build a wall against it. The sarcasm in your unit grows as you discuss the British intelligence reports you've intercepted. They still think you have thousands of men hidden in the hills. They can't comprehend that 40 men with 40 wagons and a good understanding of ballistics can paralyze an entire division. Their pride won't let them admit they are being outplayed by farmers. So, they invent Boer ghost armies to explain their failures. You find it quite flattering, really. You aren't just a soldier. You're a legend in the making, a nightmare that the British High Command is trying to wake up from. As the evening shadows stretch across the grass, you give the signal to move. The British are setting up their modern camp with their sentries and their new protocols. You, however, are sticking to the old ways. The wagon moves silently over the sand, the axles well greased with sheep fat. You are the bitterender, the one who stays when everyone else has gone home. The British can change their uniforms, they can buy new guns, and they can train their men until they drop. But they will never understand the rhythm of the veldt the way you do. You are the unlocking of a past that refuses to be buried. And the Empire's countermove is just another chapter in their long, expensive education. The paralysis of the British military reaches its absolute zenith today as you find yourself perched atop the scrub-covered heights of Magersfontein. You look down the long, gentle slope toward the Modder River and realize you are witnessing one of the greatest tactical blunders in the history of the Empire. The British, led by General Methuen, are convinced you are entrenched on the crest of the hills, as per the proper military manuals. They've spent the last several hours pounding the empty hilltops with heavy artillery, the shells throwing up geysers of red earth and rock. You can't help but chuckle softly. The sarcasm of the situation is almost too much to bear. You aren't on the hill. You are hundreds of yards in front of it, tucked into a narrow, masterfully concealed trench at the very base of the slope. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Battle of Magersfontein was a disaster for the British Highland Brigade. They marched in a tight, massive quarter-column formation through the dark and the rain, expecting to find the Boer lines on the high ground. Instead, they stumbled right into your lap in the pre-dawn light. You remember the order to hold fire until they were so close you could hear the squelch of their boots in the mud. When the Boer line finally spoke, the effect was devastating. Historians still argue whether the British failure to scout the base of the hills was due to sheer negligence or a fundamental inability to believe that farmers could innovate such a sophisticated defensive system. There's a quirky, terrifying bit of fringe history regarding the barbed wire at Magersfontein. Some reports suggest that the Boers used the local farm fencing cattle wire to create tripwires and entanglements in the dark. As the Black Watch and the Seaforth Highlanders tried to deploy, they found themselves caught in a maze of wire and lead. You've heard that some British soldiers were so traumatized by the invisible death coming from the ground that they simply lay down and refused to move for hours. You probably wouldn't survive the mental toll of being pinned in the open like that, with the sun rising and no cover but the bodies of your comrades. It's a grim reality that turned the bravery of the Victorian soldier into a paralyzed, shivering mess. The sarcasm in your trench is hushed but sharp. You watch the sun climb higher, baking the men caught in the open. They are wearing kilts, and their legs are being blistered by the sun and bitten by the ants of the veldt. You, meanwhile, are in the shade of your deep, narrow trench, occasionally taking a sip of cool water from a canteen. You've even used the mobile fortress logic here, although the wagons are hidden miles back. You've brought the same principle of maximum cover, maximum fire, to the earth itself. The British are trying to fight a war of chivalry and grand gestures, but you are fighting a war of geometry and patience. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen again out here. It's not just about the sun, it's about the sting. The British are paralyzed not just by your bullets, but by the terrain. They are stuck in a flat, featureless plain, where every move is met by a Mauser crack. You've heard that their officers tried to rally them with whistles and shouts, but in the chaos of the Magersfontein trap, those very whistles became dinner bells for your marksmen. Any man who stood up to lead was immediately targeted. By midday, the British command structure had effectively evaporated, leaving thousands of men lying prone in the dirt, waiting for a nightfall that felt a lifetime away. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that resonates with the echoes of the Modder River. Historians still argue whether the Boer victory at Magersfontein was a result of coups de l'arrêt's tactical genius or the British refusal to adapt to modern ballistics. To you, it feels like a bit of both. De l'arrêt understood that the wagonmen set the idea of a protected, mobile base could be translated into the landscape. He unlocked the past by using the old hunter-esque trick of waiting in the tall grass rather than standing on the ridge. The British, tethered to their traditions, simply walked into the mouth of the lion. The sarcasm of the aftermath is perhaps the most biting part. You watch the British retreat under a flag of truce to collect their dead, and you see the look of absolute bewilderment on their faces. They still haven't quite figured out where you were. They are looking at the hills, shaking their heads at the impenetrable fortress they thought they were attacking, while you are standing right next to the trench they never saw. It's a psychological paralysis that will haunt the British Army for the rest of the war. They've realized that the rules have changed, but they don't yet have the vocabulary to describe the new ones. As you climb out of the trench and make your way back to your wagon, you feel a heavy sense of the cost of this victory. The field is littered with khaki and tartan, a silent testament to the inefficiency of empire. You find your wagon exactly where you left it, tucked into a fold of the hills. You check the oxen, give your horse a handful of dried grass, and prepare to move. The Magersfontein trap was a masterclass in paralysis, but, the British will eventually learn. They'll bring more men, more guns, and more wire. But for today, the farmer has defeated the general, and the mobile fortress of the mind has proven more powerful than the steel of the crown. You take one last look at the ridges, the jawbone wagons silhouetted against the setting sun. You are part of a ghost army that has just broken the heart of a brigade. The past isn't just being unlocked, it's being used to write a very dark future for those who refuse to see the world as it is. You give the signal to trek, the wheels beginning their familiar, comforting groan. The paralysis continues, and the veldt remains yours. The triumph of Magersfontein feels like a lifetime ago as you sit within the confines of a tightly locked laager, realizing that the mobile fortress has a darker side, the siege. This is the grueling reality of being trapped while the sun and thirst become your primary enemies. The British have finally caught up to a large group of your commandos, and for the first time, your mobility has been neutralized. You are circled up near the banks of a dry river, the wagons forming a wooden ring of defiance. But unlike the flying column days, you can't just outspan and vanish. You are pinned by the weight of British naval guns that have been dragged inland just to crack your wooden shell. The paralysis has flipped. You aren't paralyzing their columns anymore, they are paralyzing your escape. It's a mainstream historical fact that the siege of Paardeberg was the turning point where the Boer tactic of the laager met its match against modern, concentrated artillery. For 9 days, General Piet Cronje's force was hammered by nearly 100 British guns. You hunker down beneath the chassis of your wagon, the heavy yellowwood planks vibrating with every shell impact. The British are firing lyddite, a high explosive that turns the very air yellow and leaves a bitter chemical taste in your mouth. Historians still argue whether Cronje's refusal to abandon the wagons and break out on horseback was a display of noble stubbornness or a catastrophic failure of leadership that cost the Boers their momentum. To you, it just feels like sitting inside a drum while a giant beats it with a sledgehammer. There's a quirky, stomach-turning bit of fringe history regarding the conditions inside a besieged laager, with the British sharpshooters watching every movement. You can't lead the oxen out to graze, or even reach the river for fresh water. The smell becomes an entity of its own, a mixture of rotting carcasses, unwashed men, and the sweet, cloying scent of spilled grain. You've heard of men digging shelf pits into the riverbanks, literally living in the dirt like swallows to avoid the shrapnel. Sarcasm is your only shield against the stench. You joke with your cousin that at least the British shells are killing the flies, even if they're trying to kill you too. You probably would unsurvive the claustrophobia if it were for the shared grim humor of the men around you. The heat is the true commander of this siege. By noon, the interior of the wagon circle is a furnace. The water in your barrel has turned lukewarm and tastes of the cedar staves, but you ration it by the thimbleful. You watch the British through a gap in the spokes. They are sitting comfortably in the distance, out of rifle range, just waiting for the sun to do their work for them. It's a psychological torture. They know you are a people of the open spaces, of the horizon and the long trek. By cooping you up in this wooden pen, they are breaking your spirit as much as your bones. They've turned your mobile fortress into a static cage, and the irony is as bitter as the lyddite smoke. Historians often use the phrase an open scholarly debate whether the disaster at Paardeberg was the death knell of the traditional Boer way of war. Looking at the shattered remains of the wagon next to yours, it's hard to argue. The Kakabinois was designed to withstand the veldt, not a 4.7-inch naval shell. When a wagon takes a direct hit, it doesn't just break, it disintegrates into a cloud of lethal wooden splinters. Juve had to use the wreckage of 3 wagons just to reinforce the bomb-proofs for the wounded. The past, which gave you such an advantage in movement, is now literally falling apart under the pressure of industrial warfare. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Right now, you'd trade a gallon of it for a single bucket of clean water. Your skin is cracked, your eyes are bloodshot from the dust, and your throat feels like it's been rubbed with sandpaper. But even here, In the middle of a slaughterhouse, the bitter grit persists. You spend your nights repairing the wheels of the wagons that can still roll, using rawhide to lash together spokes that have been splintered by lead. You refuse to accept that the trek is over. There's a quiet, fierce determination in the way the men pray at night, their voices low so as not to draw fire. They aren't praying for a miracle, they're praying for the strength to endure the sunrise. The sarcasm of the British mercy is particularly sharp. They send in a messenger under a white flag, offering food and medicine if you surrender. You watch Cronge send the man back with a curt refusal. Part of you admires the defiance. Another part of you looks at the thirsty oxen and wonders how much longer pride can be eaten. You've heard that the British are actually impressed by your heroic stand. Writing home about the gallant Boers in the trenches, it's easy to be romantic about a siege when you read the one holding the hammer. To you, nothing romantic about the sound of a horse screaming in the dark because it has a piece of iron in its flank. As the 9th day begins, the rain starts to fall, not a gentle drizzle, but a torrential high-veld downpour that turns the river into a surging torrent of mud. The trenches begin to flood, and the carcasses of the dead animals begin to float through the center of the laager. The British have stopped firing, not out of kindness, but because the weather has made it impossible to see. You sit in the mud, leaning against a wagon wheel that has been your only home for a week, and you realize that the era of the great wagon laager is ending. The mobile fortress was a masterpiece of the 19th century, but the 20th century has arrived with fire and high explosives. You close your eyes, the cold rain washing some of the yellow lyddite dust from your face. The paralysis of the siege is nearly complete. Tomorrow, the white flag will finally go up, and thousands of you will begin the long journey to the prisoner camps in St. Helena or Ceylon. But as you touch the wood of the wagon, you know that while they can take the wood and the iron, they haven't caught the flying columns that are still out there in the dark. The laager might be broken, but the spirit of the commando is about to become more mobile, more desperate, and more dangerous than ever before. While the mud of Paardeberg may have signaled a local defeat, it occurred against the backdrop of a larger systemic collapse of British military prestige known back in London as Black Week. You find yourself reflecting on this during a rare moment of respite, leaning against the sturdy tailgate of your wagon as you clean the grit from your Mauser's magazine. Just a few months ago, the world watched in stunned silence as you and your fellow peasant farmers delivered 3 crushing blows in a single Weecat Stormbird, Magersfontein, and Colenso. It was a trifecta of tactical paralysis that sent shockwaves from the Cape to the halls of Westminster. You've heard that the British public, raised on stories of easy colonial victories, reacted with a mixture of panic and disbelief. They expected a stroll to Pretoria. Instead, they found themselves staring into a graveyard of their own making. It's a mainstream historical fact that Black Week, December 10th to 15th, 1899, was the greatest military humiliation the British Empire had faced in a generation. At Colenso, General Buller, a man whose very name sounds like a slow-moving ox stride to force a crossing of the Tugela River against a Boer force he could uneven see. You were there, tucked into those deep riverbank trenches, watching as the British Tommy regulars marched into a storm of lead so thick it seemed to turn the air into solid metal. Historians still argue whether the British failure was due to a total lack of reconnaissance or a dogmatic adherence to Victorian frontal assault doctrines that were suicidal in the age of smokeless powder. For you, it was simpler. They played by the rules of the parade ground, and you played by the rules of the hunt. There's a quirky, almost absurd bit of fringe history regarding the British response to these defeats. Legend has it that when the news hit London, some officials actually proposed sending the London Fire Brigade to South Africa, thinking their ladders and hoses might be useful for storming Boer positions. It's the kind of high-level sarcasm that makes you shake your head. They really had no idea what they were dealing with. You've also heard that Queen Victoria famously remarked, "We are not interested in the possibilities of defeat. They do not exist." Well, as you look at the captured British 15-pounder guns now being towed by your own oak steams, it's clear that the possibilities were very much a reality on the banks of the Tugela. The paralysis of Black Week wasn't just about the numbers on a casualty list. It was a paralysis of the British command's confidence. They realized that their maps, their drills, and their entire philosophy of war were fundamentally broken. You saw it in the way they began to hesitate. Before Black Week, they would charge with a reckless, if misplaced, bravery. Afterward, they became timid, moving with a ponderous caution that only made them easier targets for your mobile columns. They were like a boxer who had been hit so hard in the first round that he forgot how to throw a punch. You, behind your wagon, were the one who landed that blow, and you did it using the very tools they mocked: wooden carts and farm rifles. There is an open scholarly debate phrase that resonates here. Historians still argue whether Black Week was a tactical fluke or a definitive proof that the era of the thin red line had been ended by the magazine rifle. From your vantage point, it felt like a reckoning. You weren't just defending a ridge, you were dismantling a century of military tradition. You've heard that the British officers at Colenso actually ordered their artillery batteries to stand in the open wheel to wheel, just as they had done against Napoleon. You watched from your trench as those brave, foolish men were mowed down by your hidden marksmen. It was a tragedy of ego, and the mobile fortress was the anvil upon which that ego was shattered. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier? Well, at Colenso, the screen was the river itself. You had carefully diverted the water and camouflaged the trenches with local brush so perfectly that the British didn't realize they were in the kill zone until the first volley hit them. There's a quiet sarcasm in the memory of their confusion. They thought they were being hit by a massive army, when in reality, it was just a few hundred men with a clear view and a steady hand. You've mastered the art of force projection, making a small group of farmers look like a legion of ghosts. The British High Command reacted to Black Week by throwing money and men at the problem. They replaced Buller with Lord Roberts and the Butcher Kitchener, and they began shipping hundreds of thousands of reinforcements. But you can't buy your way out of a tactical paralysis. As you watch the new British arrivals pale, nervous boys from the industrial North realize that they haven't learned the lessons of the veldt. They are still marching in columns, still relying on massive supply trains, and still underestimating the man behind the wagon wheel. They've changed their generals, but they haven't changed their heart. The sarcasm in your unit tonight is focused on a captured British telegram describing the setback at Stormberg. A setback. Your brother laughs, tossing a dry branch onto the fire. They lost an entire battalion to a hill they couldn't even climb. There is a grim satisfaction in knowing that the world as superpower is stumbling over its own feet. You take a moment to sharpen your knife, the rhythmic shik-shik of the stone against the steel, a meditation on the long war ahead. Black Week proved that the Empire could bleed. Now, your job is to make sure the wound never heals. As the moon rises over the Tugla, you feel the weight of the bitter end future. The British are angry now, and an angry empire is a dangerous thing. They will eventually adapt, they will burn the farms, and they will build the blockhouses. But for now, you hold the memory of Black Week like a shield. You've proven that the past your past can unlock a level of paralysis that no modern army is truly prepared for. You settle into the bed of your wagon, the wooden sides providing a familiar, sturdy embrace. The Empire is awake, but you are the nightmare they can't quite shake off. The morning air is thick with the scent of wild sage and wood smoke as you prepare for today's operation, the classic Boer ambush. This is the ultimate expression of the mobile fortress as a predatory tool. You aren't just sitting in a circle waiting for the British to find you. You are using the wagon to create a kill zone in a place where the British feel most secure. You've positioned your 3 wagons in a jagged line behind a dense cluster of acacia trees, effectively creating a wooden bulkhead that overlooks a narrow bend in the track. The British supply column, laden with the food and ammunition they so desperately need, is lumbering right into the trap. This is how you paralyze a giant, not by cutting its head off, but by starving its limbs. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boer Commando tactics relied heavily on the Hitandran ambush, a style of warfare that the British initially decried as cowardly before they realized it was simply efficient. You watch through the shimmering heat as the lead British wagon, a heavy iron-axled beast, enters the clearing. You've learned that the key to a successful ambush is patience. You don't fire at the scouts, you let them pass. You wait for the heavy weight of the column, the slow-moving heart of the beast, to get pinned between the geographical bottleneck and your hidden wagons. Historians still argue whether these ambushes were the primary reason the British eventually turned to a scorched earth policy. If they could unprotect the supplies, they would simply destroy anything that could sustain you. There's a quirky bit of fringe history regarding the Boer whistles. You don't use bugles or drums to signal the start of an ambush, you use a specific high-pitched bird call, or a sharp, short whistle. To the British ear, it sounds like the natural noise of the veldt. You've heard of commandos who could mimic the cry of a kestrel so perfectly that a British officer would be looking at the sky for a bird the moment a bullet hit his saddle. Sarcasm is your constant companion here. You think it's only fair that since they brought their civilized noise to your land, you should use the land's own voice to send them home. You probably would unsurvive the stress of these close-quarters encounters if you did have that sense of dark. Frontier irony to keep your nerves steady. As the column settles into the trap, you rest your Mauser on the thick wooden brake handle of your wagon. The wood is cool and damp with morning dew. You can see the British drivers laughing, oblivious to the fact that they are currently the center of 100 iron sights. The wagon provides you with a stable, elevated platform that a man lying in the grass simply doesn't have. You have a 360-degree field of fire, and if the British manage to return fire, you can simply drop behind the heavy planks of the jawbone frame. You aren't just a sniper, you're a sniper with a wooden tank. The first shot is the signal. You aim for the lead ox of the first wagon. A single 7mm round to the head, and the entire column grinds to a halt. The paralysis is instantaneous. The British soldiers at the back don't know why the front has stopped. The men in the middle are caught in a crossfire they can't locate. Because you're using smokeless powder, the only thing they see is their friends falling and their wagons splintering. It's, as an open scholarly debate phrase, that historians still argue whether the Boers' ability to behead a supply column with a single shot was a result of superior marksmanship or a deep understanding of British logistical panic. To you, it's just physics and a bit of luck. The sarcasm of the British reaction is almost painful to watch. They try to form square like they're fighting at Waterloo, but a square is just a larger target for a Mauser. You watch a sergeant try to unlimber a small mountain gun, but your cousin picks him off before he can even drop the trail. You've turned their own supplies into a barricade that works against them. Their wagons are blocking their own line of sight, while your wagons are perfectly positioned to see everything. You replaying a game of chess, where you've already taken their queen, and they still trying to figure out how the knights move. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, today, the screen is the chaos itself. Under the cover of the smoke and the screaming of the mules, you and a few others slip down from the wagons to loot what you can: coffee, ammunition, and perhaps a few tins of that McConaughey stew you mock, but secretly need. You work with a surgical precision, taking only what can be carried quickly. By the time the British rearguard can mount a counterattack, you're already back at the wagons. The oxen are inspanned, and you're moving. The ambush is over in 15 minutes, but the paralysis it causes will last for days. The British commander will write a report tonight about a significant engagement with a superior force. You find that hilarious? There were 12 of you, 12 men and 3 farm wagons. But because you used the mobile fortress as a strike platform, they think they were hit by a brigade. This is the unlocking of the past, using the wagon not just to survive, but to dominate. You've turned a freight vehicle into a nightmare, and the British are starting to realize that as long as they're SA track in the dirt, they are never truly safe. As you pull away, leaving the burning remains of their supply train behind, you feel a grim satisfaction. You take a sip of water from your canteen, the metal warm from the sun. The British are paralyzed, the road is blocked, and your fortress is already 5 miles away, blending back into the Golden Hills. You are the Bitterender, and the ambush is your signature on the landscape. Tomorrow, they'll be more careful, more nervous, and more tired. And you'll be waiting behind another cluster of trees with another whistle and another steady hand. As you pull your wagon through a narrow gap in the hills, you see a new jagged scar across the horizon that wasn't there last month, the blockhouse. The British, finally admitting they cannot catch you in a fair chase, have begun to lace the landscape with a network of small hexagonal forts and hundreds of miles of barbed wire. This is the Empire's ultimate response to your mobility. They are trying to turn the infinite veldt into a giant cage. It's a mainstream historical fact that the British built over 8,000 blockhouses, spaced roughly half a mile apart and linked by fences, in a desperate attempt to canalize your movement. You look at the corrugated iron and stone structure perched on a nearby ridge and feel a surge of cold sarcasm. They've spent millions of pounds to build a wall against the wind, but you've already figured out that even a wall has cracks. Historians still argue whether the blockhouse system was a strategic masterstroke that eventually won the war, or a monumental waste of resources that only served to trap the British soldiers in lonely, miserable outposts. From your perspective, it's a bit of both. The wire makes moving a large column of wagons nearly impossible at night, but for a small flying column, it's just a nuisance. You've seen commandos use heavy wire cutters or even a team of oxen to simply rip a hole in the fence and vanish. Before the sentries can even load their rifles, you probably would unsurvive the frustration of this new ox-wagons warfare if you didn't have the ingenuity to turn their own defenses against them. You've even heard of commandos using the British telegraph wire to repair. Their wagon axles talk about a quirky bit of frontier recycling. The sarcasm in your unit grows as you observe the men stationed in those tiny forts. They are essentially prisoners of their own defense. While you have the run of the veldt, they are confined to a space the size of a kitchen, staring out at the grass and jumping at every shadow. You've heard that the British soldiers hate blockhouse duty more than anything else. The boredom is as lethal as a mouse or bullet. To you, the mobile fortress is still superior because it moves. Their fortress is a static target, a monument to their inability to adapt. You watch a sentry pacing his tiny beat and realize that while he is trying to cage you, he has accidentally caged himself. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that pops up when discussing this era. Historians still argue whether the British drive system using lines of thousands of men to sweep the veldt like a broom was only made possible by the existence of the blockhouse lines. You've been caught in one of those drives before. It's a terrifying sight, a solid line of khaki stretching for 20 miles, moving toward you like a slow-motion tidal wave. But here is where the wagon proves its worth once more. Because you know the terrain, you can find the one donga, or the one rocky ravine where the blockhouse line is weak. You've learned to muffle the wagon wheels with rags and grease, the axles, until they are silent as a ghost, allowing you to slip through their impenetrable line in the dead of night. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from the early days? Well, now you need a screen for your tracks. You've started dragging thorn bushes behind the wagons to sweep away the wheel ruts, making it harder for the British drives to follow your scent. It's a game of high stakes, hide and seek. The British are trying to turn the war into a mathematical equations. So many miles of wire, so many men, so many forts, but they forgot that a human being with a wagon and a will to stay free is a variable they coup to control. You find it hilarious that they think a bit of wire can stop a people who trekked across half a continent just to be left alone. The blockhouses have forced you to change your tactics, though. You can't move the massive laagers of 100 wagons anymore. You have to break into small guerrilla cells. Your wagon has become even more of a self-contained unit. You've stripped away everything but the essentials to keep it light. You've replaced the heavy canvas with lighter animal skins. And you've reinforced the floorboards with extra iron to protect against the occasional mine the British have started burying near the gates. You are unlocking the past by returning to the most primitive, stripped-down version of the Trek mobility above all else. The sarcasm of the British victory is evident when you see how much effort it takes them to maintain a single line of wire. They have to patrol it constantly, repair the cuts you make every night, and keep the blockhouses supplied with food and water. You, meanwhile, are eating biltong and drinking from a hidden spring 5 miles away. You are a fluid flowing around their solid rocks. They are trying to dam a river with a handful of stones, and they are constantly surprised when the water finds a way around. Every time you cross a blockhouse line, you leave a little thank you note, usually a mocking poem or a bit of empty biltong fatten their wire just to let them know you were there. As the sun sets, casting long, thin shadows from the barbed wire across the red earth, you prepare to make your move. The blockhouse on the hill has just lit its searchlight, a pale finger of light poking into the dark. It looks impressive, but you know it creates even deeper shadows where you can hide. You give the signal to the oxen, and the wagon begins to roll toward the fence. This is the paralysis of the cage. The British think they have you cornered, but they've only succeeded in defining the boundaries of your next escape. You are the bitter ender, and no amount of British iron can hold a man who treats the horizon as his only home. You reach the wire, and with a few swift, silent cuts, the cage is open. The wagon slides through the gap, the wheels barely making a sound on the soft sand. You look back at the blockhouse, a dark silhouette against the stars, and you smile. They're still in there, waiting for a Boer army that has already passed them by. The past has unlocked a way through the future's defenses, and the veldt is wide and open once more. As you navigate the wagon through the gap in the wire, you feel the persistent ache in your lower back that has become your constant companion. This is the reality of life in the saddle and on the wagon, grueling, physical existence that has aged you 10 years in the span of 2. You haven't slept under a permanent roof in months, and your mobile fortress has become your entire world. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boer Commandos of the later war years lived in a state of near-constant motion, often spending up to 16 hours a day on the move to evade the British drives. Your body has adapted to the rhythmic creak of the wood and the jolting of the axles over unmapped terrain. You are lean, sun-scorched, and hard as the iron wood of your wagon's frame. Historians still argue whether the physical toll on the commandos was the primary reason for the eventual surrender, or if the psychological weight of seeing their land burned was the true breaking point. From your perspective, it's a blur of exhaustion. You've learned to sleep while walking next to the oxen, resting one hand on the wagon's side for balance. You've learned to ignore the veldt sores that refuse to heal because of the constant dust and lack of fresh greens. You probably would unsurvive this level of physical deprivation if it were unt for the communal grit of your unit. There's a quirky, almost absurd bit of fringe history that says some commandos became so accustomed to the movement that they found it difficult to sleep on stationary ground when they finally reached a town. They needed the vibration of the wheels to drift off. The sarcasm of your situation is a vital survival tool. You joke about your rolling palace as you scrape the mud off your boots with a piece of scavenged British shrapnel. You look at your clothes, mended so many times with rawhide and twine that they look more like a map of the war than a garment. You've heard that the British soldiers are still obsessed with polishing their buttons and spitching their boots in the middle of a desert. To you, that seems like a bizarre form of madness. Out here, the only thing that needs to be clean is your rifle S-bolt and the eyes of the oxen. Everything else is just a layer of the veldt that hasn't fallen off yet. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that resonates during these long treks. Historians still argue whether the Boer Commando was the last of the great citizen soldier armies or the first of the modern insurgent forces. Sitting on the wagon, you feel like neither. You feel like a farmer who has been forced to turn his life into a kinetic energy experiment. You've modified your wagon to be a more efficient living space, installing small wooden racks for your coffee tin, and a hidden compartment for the Republic S remaining gold or documents. You are a self-contained unit of resistance, a fortress that doesn't just protect you from bullets, but from the elements and the crushing weight of loneliness. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, your skin has become so weathered, it probably doesn't even need it anymore. You've developed a hunter's squint from years of looking into the sun, and your hands are calloused from the reins and the rifle stock. This physical transformation is part of your camouflage. You look like the rocks, you smell like the rain-drenched earth, and you move with the steady, unhurried pace of the indigenous wildlife. The British, with their red faces and their heavy European-style boots, look like alien invaders who are being slowly rejected by the very air they breathe. You are the bitter ender because your body has forgotten how to be anything else. The sarcasm in the camp, if you can call a 15-minute halt a camp, is focused on a captured British diary found in a burnt-out supply cart. The young officer complained that there was no glory in chasing invisible goats across a featureless wasteland. You find that hilarious? To you, the wasteland is full of features: a hidden spring here, a patch of edible roots there, a perfect ambush point behind that copy. His lack of glory is your tactical paralysis. Every day he spends complaining is a day he isn't catching you. You've turned your physical endurance into a strategic asset that the Empire's money simply sued by. You watch the oxen, their heads low, their breath heavy in the cool evening air. They are the unsung heroes of this mobile fortress. They endure the same thirst, the same long miles, and the same biting flies that you do. You've learned to read their moods to know when they are reaching their limit and when they can push for another 5 miles. This connection to the animals and the land is the unlocking of the past that keeps you one step ahead of the British steam engines. You are powered by biology and grit. They are powered by coal and bureaucracy. In the long run, biology usually wins. As the moon rises, casting a pale light over the trackless grass, you pull your tattered coat around your shoulders and lean your head against the wagon's wooden upright. The world is silent, except for the low groan of the turning wheels. You are tired in a way that sleep can't fix, but you are still moving. The British are paralyzed in their blockhouses and their tented cities, but you are free. This life in the saddle is a hard one, but it has made you part of the landscape you are defending. You are the ghost of the high veldt, and as long as the wagon keeps rolling, the war is never truly over. You close your eyes for a few minutes, the steady rhythm of the trek acting as a heartbeat. Tomorrow will be another 40 miles of dust and heat, another ridge to scout, another wire to cut. But for now, you are a master of the mobile fortress, a man who has traded a roof for the stars and a bed for a wooden plank. And honestly, you wouldn't have it any other way. As you pull your wagon toward a familiar, hidden valley, you aren't looking for a military unit, but for the flickering lantern of a farmstead. This is where you encounter the true beating heart of the mobile resistance, the women of the veldt. While the men are in the front lines, the Boer women have turned every farmhouse into a logistical hub and every kitchen into an intelligence center. They are the ones who keep your mobile fortresses supplied, repaired, and most importantly informed. It is a mainstream historical fact that the British High Command eventually realized they were just fighting an army of men, but a mobilized society where the women played a combat support role so vital that it forced the British into the controversial scorched earth policy. They didn't just burn the farms to be cruel, they burned them because a farm was a Boer fortress in all but name. Historians still argue whether the legendary defiance of the Boer women actually prolonged the war to a point of national ruin, or if it was the only thing that kept the republics alive. From your seat on the wagon, the debate feels irrelevant. You only know that, without the fresh bread, the hank-knitted socks, and the whispered warnings about British patrols, your commando would have dissolved months ago. You've seen women standing on their porches, using colored laundry or specific shutter positions to signal the movements of British columns to scouts hidden on the ridges. It's a quirky, domestic bit of fringe history that the code of the clothesline was often more accurate than the British telegraph. You probably would unsurvive the isolation of the trek if you did know that every few miles there was a sister or a mother watching out for you. The sarcasm in the commando takes a somber turn when you talk about the British sweep teams. You've heard of British officers who are genuinely baffled when they encounter a farm woman who refuses to give them information, even with a bayonet at her door. They expect us to be like the ladies in London, your cousin remarks, waiting for a letter and a box of chocolates. Instead, they find women who can ride as well as any man, and who will look a general in the eye and tell him exactly where he can stick his proclamation of surrender. This psychological steel is the foundation of the bitter spirit. You aren't just fighting for territory, you're fighting for these homes, and the women are the ones making sure those homes remain worth fighting for. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that often surfaces when discussing this home front. Historians still argue whether the British concentration camps were a military necessity to stop this support network or a war crime born of frustration. To you, it's the ultimate admission of British failure. They couldn't catch the wagons, so they took the families who fed the men in those wagons. You see the smoke on the horizon, another farm being torched, and it fuels a cold, quiet rage that no military drill could ever produce. The mobile fortress has to be even more self-reliant now, because the fixed fortresses the farms are being systematically erased from the map. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen again out here. The women have their own versions of veldt. They've learned to hide grain under floorboards, bury rifles in the gardens, and even sew messages into the hems of their children's clothes. You've seen a woman lead a British patrol in the completely wrong direction, while her teenage son slipped out the back to warn your commando. This isn't just support, it's active resistance. There's a biting sarcasm in the way the British call them non-combatants. If a non-combatant is someone who makes sure the enemy never sleeps and always runs out of coffee, then the British have a very strange definition of the word. As you load a fresh sack of mealie meal onto your wagon, provided by a woman whose husband is currently fighting 300 miles to the south, you feel the weight of this partnership. She doesn't ask for payment, she only asks that you keep the wheels turning. The wagon is no longer just a transport for your gear. It's a vessel for the hopes of the people the British are trying to break. You've started camouflaging your wagon with even more care. Using the techniques the women taught, you're rubbing the canvas with specific clays to match the local soil. You are unlocking the past by returning to a tribal total war footing where everyone has a role. The British are paralyzed by this. They are used to fighting gentlemanly wars, where you capture a capital and the civilians go back to their business. They don't know how to handle a woman who will burn her own crops rather than let a British horse eat them. They are fighting a machine. You are fighting a family. This cultural grit is what allows you to survive the life in the saddle you've been enduring. You know that as long as one farm woman is left with a bag of flour and a secret to tell, the British Empire is just a guest in a house that hates them. As the sun dips low, you give a quiet nod of thanks to the woman at the gate. She doesn't wave goodbye. She just watches, her face a mask of weathered determination. You pull the wagon away, the wheels groaning under the new weight of the supplies. You are moving back into the dark, back into the wire and the blockhouses, but you feel lighter. The mobile fortress is fueled once again, not just by grain and meat, but by the defiance of the veldt's daughters. Tomorrow, you'll use those supplies to outrun another British drive. And the cycle of paralysis will continue, powered by the people the Empire forgot to fear. The wagon crests a small rise, and for a moment, the sun catches a blinding glint of light from a distant peak knot, the flash of a rifle, but the rhythmic, intentional pulse of a heliograph. This is the secret language of the veldt, the high-tech signaling of the 1890s that you've mastered to stay one step ahead of the Empire. While the British rely on massive coils of telegraph wire that your scouts regularly chop into pieces, you use the sun itself to transmit messages across 50 miles of empty space. This is the communication by signal phase of your resistance, where your mobile fortress becomes a node in a wireless network that the British can see but rarely touch. You've turned the very light of the African sky into a tactical asset that keeps your commandos coordinated like a pack of hunting wolves. It is a mainstream historical fact that both sides use the heliographa system of mirrors and shutters that flashes Morse code extensively during the Boer War. However, the Boers often had the advantage of height and a deeper knowledge of the atmospheric mirages of the high veld. You've seen British signalers struggling with the haze, while your men, positioned on the absolute peaks of the most remote copies, can send a message from Pretoria to the borders of Natal in a matter of hours. Historians still argue whether the Boers' superior use of heliography was the primary reason they were able to coordinate simultaneous attacks across such a vast, trackless front. To you, it's just the long-distance shout. There's a quirky, almost cheeky bit of fringe history regarding how you've hacked the British communications. Because many Boers are fluent in English, and some were actually trained in the same signaling schools before the war. You've spent many afternoons sitting behind your wagon wheel with a captured British signal book, listening to their flashes. Sarcasm runs high when you intercept a British message about a secret troop movement and realize they're reflashing it in plain sight for anyone on a hill to see. You probably would unsurvive the audacity of this war if you didn't enjoy the irony of using the Queen's own signaling codes to lead her colonels into a swamp. The paralysis of the British is compounded by this information gap. They assume that because they have the modern technology, they own the airwaves. But you've turned your wagon into a mobile receiving station. When the sun is too low or the clouds move in, you switch to lamp signaling or the old-fashioned relay of riders. This redundancy is what makes your communication unkillable. You've seen British units get completely cut off because a single wire was snipped, whereas your flying columns are always in touch with the great signal. You aren't just a man in a wagon. You are part of a sentient, reacting organism that knows where the enemy is before the enemy knows it himself. There's an open scholarly debate phrase that often surfaces here. Historians still argue whether the Boer's decentralized command structure, aided by rapid heliography, was the first true prototype of network-centric warfare. Looking at the way your Veldekornet reacts to a flash of light from 20 miles away, it's hard to disagree. He doesn't need to wait for a written order from a general in a distant city. The signal tells him the British are moving. The land tells him where they will be, and the wagon gives him the means to get there first. You've unlocked the past by combining the ancient scout's eyes with the speed of light. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen joke? Well, now you're using the screen of the hills. You've learned to position your signalers in places where the British can see the backflash of the mirror, ensuring your communications remain one way. There's a quiet sarcasm in watching a British intelligence officer trying to find your headquarters. He's looking for a building with wires and a flag. He doesn't realize the headquarters is currently a man sitting on a rock with a piece of polished glass, and that the archives are tucked into the trap of a wagon moving through a ravine 5 miles to the west. The British have tried to counter this by using their own heliographs to send fake messages, but you've developed Parole's secret keywords that change every day. If the signal does unstart with the name of a specific farm or a verse from a specific psalm, you know it's a trap. You've heard of British signalers becoming so frustrated with your ghost flashes that they started trying to block the sun with smoke screens. It's a hilarious sight. A British brigade burning precious coal and damp would just to stop a farmer from winking at his neighbor with a mirror. As the afternoon sun begins to dip, you watch the last message of the day flash from a ridge to the north. The drive is turning east. Trek tonight. You acknowledge the signal with a quick, single flash of your own hand mirror and begin the process of inspecting. The wagon is ready, the oxen are rested, and you have the eyes of the entire province watching your back. The British are paralyzed by their reliance on physical connections wires, rails, and roads. You are connected by the sun and the stars. The mobile fortress begins to roll once more, guided by the silent light. You feel a sense of technological triumph that offsets your lack of heavy artillery. You don't need a long tom cannon to hit the British when you can hit their plans before they even execute them. You are the Bitterinder, and as long as the sun shines on the high veldt, you will never be out of touch. The past has given you the patience to watch the horizon, and the future has given you the tools to turn that horizon into a weapon. The air has grown thin and cold as you guide your wagon into the rugged folds of the eastern Transvaal. You look back at the trail and realize the flying column has shrunk. Where there were once 50 wagons, now there are only 6. This is the stage of the final resistance, where the grand strategy of the republics has devolved into a desperate thinning line of survival. The British scorched earth policy has finally begun to bite. The horizon is no longer just dust and grass. It is frequently punctuated by the black, skeletal remains of farmsteads and the heavy, stagnant smoke of burning grain. The mobile fortress is now your only home, your only church, and your only hope. You are the Bitterinder in the most literal sense of man fighting on the ragged edge of a vanishing world. It's a mainstream historical fact that by 1902, the British drives and the destruction of over 30,000 farmhouses had effectively stripped the veldt of its ability to sustain a large-scale insurgency. You've seen the Butcher-Kitchener-esque policy in action. If they catch you, they will kill what feeds you. Historians still argue whether this total war approach was a military necessity to end the FDA stalemate or a moral catastrophe that permanently scarred South African society. For you, the debate is written in the hungry eyes of your oxen. You are now forced to operate in the most impassable Turanda, deep kloofs, and high mountain bolts where even the British scouts fear to tread. The paralysis has become mutual. The British can't find you in the mountains, but you can't descend into the plains without risking certain capture. There's a quirky, heart-wrenching bit of fringe history regarding the wagon schools of this final year. Because the families were often fleeing with the commandos to avoid the camps, the wagons became mobile classrooms. You've seen a mother sitting on the tailgate of a moving kakabinwa, teaching her children their letters, using a stick in the dust while her husband scouts for British Lancers. Sarcasm is your only defense against the tragedy of it. You tell the kids that at least they're getting a high-velocity education. You probably would unsurvive the emotional weight of this final stand if you did. Unfocused on the mechanical reality of the wagon, the need to grease the wheels, the need to find one more patch of unburnt grass, the British are paralyzed by the sheer tenacity of your dying resistance. They've declared the war over 3 times already in the London newspapers, yet every time they send a supply column out, you emerge from the mist like a vengeful ghost to take what they have. Your wagon has become a masterpiece of improvisation. UVA replaced broken spokes with raw branches of Korea wood and patched the canvas with the hides of mountain zebras. You are unlocking the past by returning to a nomadic state that predates even the Great Trek. You've become a part of the mountain ecology, as elusive and hardy as a leopard. There's an open, scholarly debate phrase that resonates in the cold mountain nights. Historians still argue whether the Boer resistance in 1902 was a heroic stand for independence or a stubborn refusal to recognize an inevitable defeat. When you look at the men around the fire, their clothes in tatters but their mouths are spotless, inevitable feels like a foreign word. You aren't fighting for a government anymore. You are fighting for the right to exist without a cage. The sarcasm in the unit is directed at the joiners, the Boers who have surrendered and are now scouting for the British. To you, they are the truly paralyzed ones. They've traded their horizon for a bowl of British porridge. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen joke? It feels like a lifetime ago. Now, you're using soot and animal fat to blacken your face for night raids on British blockhouses. The mobile fortress has become a raiding platform. You leave the heavy wagons hidden in the deep ravines and move out on your best ponies to strike at the railway lines. You've learned to use the terrain to channel the British drives into dead ends. They bring 10,000 men to catch 10, and you lead them on a dance through the rocks until their horses drop dead and their spirits break. You are the masters of the empty victory. The British are increasingly frustrated. They have the towns, the rails, and the gold mines, but they don't have the peace. They are paralyzed by a victory they can't finalize. You've heard that Lord Kitchener is growing gray with a strain of trying to catch the last few ghosts of the veldt. You find a quiet, grim satisfaction in that. You might be hungry, you might be cold, and your wagon might be falling apart, but you are still the one who decides when the shooting stops. You are the bitter ender, and the final resistance is your testament to the world. As the moon sets behind a jagged peak, you lean against the wagon's rear wheel and listen to the wind howling through the struts. It sounds like the voices of all those who came before you, whispering that the trek is never truly over. You check the priming of your rifle one last time. Tomorrow, the British will try another sweep, and tomorrow, you will find another gap in the wire. The past has unlocked a level of endurance that the Empire's modernity can't compute. You are the last of the wooden fortresses, and you will hold the line until the last wheel stops turning. As you sit by a dying fire in the deep shadows of the Drakensberg, you realize that while the war may be drawing to a close, the tactics you've pioneered are about to change the face of global conflict forever. You, VA, taken a 19th century farm wagon and a 17th century lifestyle and used them to rewrite the 20th century military manual. This is the legacy of the commando, where the paralysis you inflicted on the British columns becomes the blueprint for the elite forces of the future. The world has been watching this peasant war with a mixture of horror and fascination, and the lessons learned from your mobile fortresses are already being studied by military attaches from Berlin to Washington. You aren't just a defeated farmer, you are the unwitting father of modern special operations. It's a mainstream historical fact that the British Army's experience against the Boer Commandos led directly to the formation of their own elite units and a total overhaul of their tactical doctrine. Men like Jan Smuts and Christian de Wet showed that a small, highly mobile, and decentralized force could stymie a vastly superior industrial power. Historians still argue whether the Boer War was the first modern war or the last colonial war. But in terms of tactics, the legacy is clear. You've proven that the front line is an obsolete concept in the face of a dedicated guerrilla force. The commando name itself would eventually be adopted by Winston Churchill. Let's not forget, was captured by your people to describe the elite British raiding units of World War II. There, as a quirky bit of fringe history regarding the Boer influence on the development of the tank. Some of the very engineers who saw how your wagons could absorb fire and provide a mobile firing platform were the ones who began to conceptualize the landship. They saw the laager not as an antique, but as a modular, armored unit. Sarcasm is your constant companion as you think about the British finally building iron wagons, because they could unhandle your wooden ones. You probably would unsurvive the irony of knowing that the very empire that tried to crush you would end up spending the next century trying to imitate your Hitandran philosophy. The legacy of the mobile fortress also lives on in the concept of long-range desert, groups and flying columns that would dominate the North African theater decades from now. You've taught the world that, in a vast, arid landscape, the prize doesn't go to the man with the heaviest gun, but to the man with the most sustainable mobility. Your biltong, your borkperts, and your jawbone wagons were the prototypes for a kind of warfare that prioritizes logistics and fieldcraft over sheer numbers. It's an open scholarly debate phrase that historians still argue whether the Boer's decentralization was a lucky accident of their culture or a deliberate tactical innovation that predicted the cellular structure of modern insurgencies. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen one last time. It's the ultimate metaphor for the legacy you're leaving behind: adaptation. You took what was available: leather, wood sun, and dirt hand, turned it into a defense that paralyzed an empire. The British are leaving this war with a victory, but they are also leaving with a profound sense of vulnerability. They've learned that a red coat is a target, that a parade is a trap, and that a wagon can be a fortress. UVA unlocked the past only to find that it contains the keys to the future of warfare. The sarcasm in your weary group today is quiet and reflective. You talk about what will happen to the wagons when the guns finally fall silent. Some will go back to hauling wool, some will be left to rot in the dongas, and some will end up in museums. But the idea of the wagon, the idea of the self-contained mobile warrior, is something that can't be put in a glass case. You've seen the way the younger British officers look at you now. There's a grudging respect in their eyes. They aren't looking at a peasant anymore, they are looking at a specialist. You look at your Mauser, its bluing worn away by years of handling. This rifle, combined with your wagon, changed the geometry of the battlefield. UV made the world realize that a man who knows how to hide and how to move is worth 100 men who only know how to stand and die. This is the unlocking of the past that will haunt the 20th century. From the trenches of France to the jungles of Vietnam, the ghost of the Boer Commando will be there, whispering that the landscape is the greatest weapon of all. As the sun sets on the era of the great Boer republics, you feel a strange sense of accomplishment that transcends the loss of the war. UV held the world's superpower at bay for 3 years with nothing but farm tools and grit. You've paralyzed their army, emptied their treasury, and shattered their ego. The wagon may be creaking, and the oxen may be tired, but the legacy you've built is as unyielding as the ironwood axles. You are the bitter ender, and while you may be going home to a charred farm, you are also going home as the man who taught the world how to fight the future by using the tools of the past. The final signature has been dried on the Treaty of Vereeniging, and the silence that follows is more deafening than any British bombardment. You stand by the side of the track, watching the last of the bitterenders begin the slow, agonizing journey back to where their lives began. This is the long trek home, the closing chapter of our journey. You lean your shoulder against the weathered wood of your wagon, the same wooden fortress that carried you through the fire of Colenso and the freezing nights of the High Veldt. Realize that the wheels are turning one last time. There is no more ammunition in the trap, and the flying column has finally grounded its wings. You are a man returning to a land that has been systematically erased. Yet as you look at the horizon, you realize the British never truly captured the one thing that mattered. They took the farm, but they couldn't take the veldt. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Boers returned to a landscape of utter desolation. Over 30,000 farms had been razed, and the livestock populations were decimated. You've heard the term, Vredefort whispered, the Fort of Peace, but as you look at the charred remains of a neighbor's homestead, the peace feels like a heavy shroud. Historians still argue whether the terms of the peace were a generous gesture of British reconciliation or a calculated move to absorb the Boer republics into a manageable colonial structure. To you, the political maneuvering is just noise. Your focus is on the formal line-hor rhythm of the oxen. You are unlocking the past once more, but this time you are using the wagon to rebuild a life instead of paralyzing an army. There's a quirky, deeply moving bit of fringe history regarding the return of the wagons. Many commandos, upon reaching their ruined farms, didn't immediately move into the blackened stone shells of their houses. They continued to live in their cake benoits for months, sometimes years. The wagon had become a psychological sanctuary, the only place that had been touched by the British scorched earth policy because it had always been moving. Sarcasm is hard to find today, but you manage a small, dry smile when you see a British patrol offer you a tin of bully beef as a gesture of goodwill. You take it, not because you need their charity, but because the tin makes a perfect patch for a hole in your wagon's water barrel. The paralysis of the war has ended, but a new kind of stillness has taken its place. You see the British blockhouses being dismantled, their corrugated iron sold off to farmers to patch roofs. The cage is being recycled. You realize that while you lost the war of flags and maps, you won the war of endurance. You are still here. Your wagon is still rolling. The British are already beginning to pull their massive divisions back to the docks of Cape Town, leaving behind a land they conquered but never truly understood. They are the visitors. You are the permanent resident. This cultural grit is the final mobile fortress that no naval gun could ever penetrate. They're an open scholarly debate phrase that seems to hang in the evening mist. Historians still argue whether the Boer War was the final gasp of 19th century tribalism or the birth pangs of 20th century nationalism. As you unspan the oxen for the night, the distinction feels blurred. You are just a man who wants to see the grass grow again. You've turned your jawbone wagon into a tool of construction, using the heavy timber to haul the stones needed to rebuild your walls. The legacy of the commando isn't just about the ambush and the marksmanship. It's about the ability to survive the end of your world and keep trekking toward the next sunrise. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? You won't need it for a while. You'll be trading the Mauser for a plow and the bandolier for a seed bag. But as you touch the deep grooves in the wagon, wheel scars from the rocks of the Drakensberg and the shrapnel of Paardeberg, know that the lessons of the mobile fortress are etched into your soul. You've learned that freedom isn't a place you reach. It's the movement itself. The British columns are gone, the wire is being cut down for fence posts, and the high veldt is reclaiming its silence. You are the bitterender, and you have finally reached the end of the long, bitter road. The sun is dipping below the rim of the world now, painting the clouds in shades of deep violet and bruised orange. The long shadows of the acacias reach out across the grass, and the air is turning cool and sweet with the scent of the evening dew. It's time to let the fire burn down to glowing embers. Imagine the creak of the wagon wheels fading into the distance, a steady, rhythmic pulse that grows softer and softer until it's snuffed more than a memory in the wind. You can feel the weight of the day's journey lifting from your shoulders, replaced by the profound, heavy peace of the veldt at night. The oxen are quiet, they're slow breathing, a gentle lullaby in the dark. The stars are opening their eyes above you, vast and ancient, watching over a land that has seen so much fire and now asks only for rest. Let your mind drift like the smoke from a dying dung fire, rising slowly into the cool night air. The war is over, the trek is done, and the wagon is finally still. Close your eyes and let the silence of the high veldt wrap around you, a soft, velvet blanket that shields you from the world. Sleep now, for the horizon is safe, and the journey has brought you exactly where you were always meant to be. Would you like me to create a detailed map of the major Boer Commando routes, or provide a technical breakdown of the Kakabinwa engineering specs?